Hey, welcome to Sleep Crime Stories. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? A quick comment and a subscribe go a long way, it really helps. Now, turn down the lights, and let's begin tonight's case. In the early hours of December 18, 1994, a chilling incident shook the coastal city of Port Elizabeth, located in South Africa. A young woman was discovered unconscious on a remote, dark road far from the city. She had been brutally assaulted, and her rescuers were shocked to find that despite the severity of her injuries, she was still clinging to life. Without hesitation, they did everything they could to save her. The injured woman, Allison Botha, was rushed to the nearest hospital. The medical team could hardly believe their eyes. Her body had endured so many stab wounds that it seemed unimaginable she could still be alive. But Allison, against all odds, held on. The hours following this tragic event felt endless, and the lives of everyone who assisted her or waited anxiously for news of her recovery were forever changed. As the police tirelessly searched for the person responsible for such a horrific crime, the doctors witnessed something extraordinary: Allison's remarkable survival. What had happened defied medical explanation. Allison Botha's story soon spread worldwide, becoming known as a true miracle. She herself took on the mission of sharing her tale of survival and resilience, using her voice to transform the pain she had endured into a source of inspiration for thousands. Allison found a new way to live, shaped by the horrific experience she had faced, yet determined to make that experience a beacon of hope for others. This is her story. Allison Botha was born on September 22, 1967, in Port Elizabeth, a city known for its expansive beaches along Algoa Bay. Growing up with her parents, Brian and Claire, and her brother Neil, Allison enjoyed a fairly carefree childhood. When she was 10, her parents divorced, but this didn't significantly affect her temperament. As a child, she was somewhat detached from her surroundings, and her school years were fairly unremarkable, as her interests seemed to lie elsewhere. As she grew older, Allison realized she didn't have big dreams or ambitions for her future. After completing high school, she pursued a one-year secretarial course at her mother's suggestion as a safety net for an uncertain future. During her teenage years, Allison became curious about the world beyond Port Elizabeth. For several years, she traveled abroad, living new adventures and discovering unfamiliar lands. These experiences gradually shaped her character, and she started to gain more clarity about her motivations in life. After 4 years of traveling, she decided to return home, partly to ease her mother's worries about the distance and her well-being. Back in Port Elizabeth, things returned to normal, but Allison had changed. She found a job she enjoyed as an insurance broker, and when she wasn't working, she spent much of her time with friends, eagerly awaiting the summer months to enjoy days at the beach. But one summer day would lead to an unimaginable event that would forever alter the course of her life. On December 18, 1994, with the summer heat in full swing in Algoa Bay, Allison spent the day at the beach with friends. As the sun set, they continued the evening at her home, sharing pizzas and beers. Later that night, one of Allison's friends needed a ride home, and Allison, 27 at the time, offered to drive her. After safely dropping off her friend, she headed back, unaware that her life was about to take a terrifying turn. As Allison parked her car, a man suddenly approached and got into the driver's seat, threatening her with a weapon and ordering her to move to the passenger side. A chill ran through her body as she realized the danger she was in. Any attempt to escape seemed futile, and she feared for her life. The man, later identified as Franz, started driving through the city, all the while trying to reassure her, saying his name was Clinton and asking her casual questions, though Allison didn't respond. After a brief stop to pick up an accomplice, who joined them in the back seat, Allison's hope of surviving began to fade. The car soon left the city and headed down a dark, deserted road. Allison's breath quickened as the vehicle came to a stop. One of the men asked her, "Are you going to fight?" By then, Allison had resigned herself to what was coming. One man violently attacked her while the other waited. She overheard the name Franz during the assault and realized this was her attacker's real identity. The violence escalated as both men took turns, abusing and torturing her. When they were finished, they attempted to kill her. They stabbed her repeatedly, 37 times in total, targeting her abdomen and pubic area. When they noticed she was still alive, they slashed her throat, inflicting 16 more stab wounds. Convinced they had killed her, the attackers fled in her car, leaving Allison to die, naked and gravely injured in the sand. Despite her horrific injuries, Allison found the will to survive. She thought of her mother and how devastated she would be if her daughter were to die at the hands of these men. With what little strength she had left, Allison managed to drag herself towards the road. Before leaving the scene, she scrawled the names of her attackers in the sand and wrote a message of love for her mother. As she tried to stand, she noticed an odd sound coming from her breathing and realized her trachea had been destroyed. Her head, barely attached to her body, hung precariously, but even then, Allison refused to give up. She felt something wet against her leg. It was her intestines. Determined to survive, Allison Botha held her head steady with one hand and clutched her organs with the other. Step by step, she made her way towards the paved road where she collapsed, waiting for someone to help. In the distance, the headlights of a car sparked a glimmer of hope, but when it came near, the vehicle sped away, likely in shock at the horrifying sight of her condition. As each minute passed, Allison's strength waned until, finally, another car appeared. This time it stopped. Tion, a young veterinary student vacationing in Port Elizabeth with friends, stepped out and ran toward Allison. He immediately grasped the severity of her condition but stayed by her side, doing everything he could to save her. He called for an ambulance and held her hand, offering comfort while she fought for her life. Though panic gripped him inside, Tion kept his composure, never letting Allison see his worry. After what seemed like an eternity, the ambulance arrived and Allison was rushed to the hospital. Her life would never be the same, but she clung to it, determined to seize this second chance. By the time Allison arrived at the hospital, an hour and a half had passed since the brutal attack. The doctors were stunned by what they saw. Her wounds bore the marks of unimaginable cruelty. None had ever seen anything like it, but they wasted no time. Allison's sheer will to live inspired the medical team to fight for her, despite the grim prognosis. Remarkably, Allison managed to sign the consent for surgery without hesitation. Alongside her signature, she wrote her mother's phone number, a simple yet profound gesture. When she was taken into the operating room, the night stretched on. Allison had been on the verge of decapitation, breathing through a hole left by a stab wound in her trachea. Her exposed organs were covered in sand and debris from the beach, presenting a massive challenge for the doctors. But fortunately, an experienced general surgeon was on call that night. He painstakingly worked through the night, removing every foreign particle and carefully stitching each wound. Miraculously, the knife had missed Allison's major blood vessels. Had they been severed, she would have died within minutes. Her vital organs, though severely damaged, had also escaped the worst, and slowly her body began to heal. Still, a significant concern loomed over her recovery, the high risk of acute infection. Everyone anxiously awaited the outcome of the surgery. As Allison lay in intensive care, 2 police officers arrived at the hospital. They had a list of suspects and hoped she would be able to identify them. When Allison awoke the next morning, she reviewed a series of photos. She paused on one image, pointing to a man she recognized as Franz Dutroux, then wrote his name on a piece of paper. She did the same when she saw the photo of Thunes Kruger. The police had what they needed, but they returned later for confirmation. It turned out that both Franz Dutroux and Thunes Kruger had criminal records, including charges of assault. Months before attacking Allison, Dutroux had abducted a 19-year-old woman, assaulted her, and later bought her food and rose before attacking her again. Though he was arrested in February 1994, he was released on bail. In March, Dutroux and Kruger assaulted another woman, who was 3 months pregnant. After the attack, they let her go. Though they were briefly detained for this crime, they were quickly released with a court date set for January. But instead of complying, the 2 men had far darker intentions. They wanted to kill, and unfortunately, Allison became their next target. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the prosecutor insisted Allison verbally name her attackers for the case to proceed. The doctors were hesitant. Allison was still in critical condition and had a breathing tube in place, making it impossible for her to speak. The risk of removing the tube was high, but Allison, with incredible determination, wrote a note authorizing its removal. Once the tube was taken out, Allison whispered, "Franz Dutroux and Thunes Kruger." Her quiet words carried the weight of undeniable truth, laying bare the failures of the justice system. Finally, there was enough evidence to arrest the men. By 5 a.m. on December 19, 1994, both Dutroux and Kruger were taken into custody, charged with assault and attempted murder. When confronted with the charges, Dutroux expressed confusion, only to be informed that Allison had survived. With no choice but to confess, he handed over the knife used in the attack and returned Allison's blood-stained ring, which he had kept as a souvenir. Kruger also confessed, showing no remorse and even admitting that they had planned another assault, this time intending to throw their victim off a bridge. During the trial, Dutroux tried to lessen his guilt, claiming to be a Satanist possessed by a demon that forced him to commit these acts, but the court saw through his excuses. Both men were convicted of kidnapping, indecent assault, rape, and attempted murder. Franz Dutroux was sentenced to 3 life terms, while Thunes Kruger received 1 life sentence plus 25 years. The judge insisted that a note be added to the case file, ensuring they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. With the threat of Dutroux and Kruger finally neutralized, Allison began the long process of healing. Her will to live was immense, but recovery wasn't easy. After months in the hospital and grueling physical therapy, Allison was devastated to learn she could no longer have children due to damage to her reproductive organs. Returning home to live with her mother, she found herself sinking into depression. Everyone around her seemed to be moving on, but she felt lost, unsure how to resume her life. In 1995, just a year after the horrific attack, Allison met her partner, Allison Botha. The two bonded over their shared struggles. Allison had battled depression stemming from unresolved childhood trauma, while Allison was in the midst of her own fight to rebuild her life. The couple married in February 1997, and together they began a new chapter of their lives. In November 2003, they welcomed their first child, a son named Daniel, and in November 2006, their second son, Matthew, was born. Reflecting on motherhood, Allison said, "Being a mother is the most important thing I've ever done. Knowing that life is now about someone else is an incredibly humbling experience." In one of her interviews, Allison shared that one day she hopes to tell her children about her past. She believes it's better they hear her story from her directly, rather than through a book or a television show. However, she plans to wait until they're ready and come to her with questions. Since that moment, and after overcoming the initial shock, Allison has shared her story in over 35 countries. She became one of the first women in South Africa to publicly speak about surviving rape, helping countless others come forward with their own stories. When speaking to other survivors of sexual violence, she often reminds them, "You are not responsible for the actions of others. Life isn't defined by what happens to you, but by how you choose to respond to it." In the years since her attack, Allison has written 2 books. In 2016, her remarkable story of survival was adapted into a film titled Allison. Today, she remains one of the world's most inspiring motivational speakers, using her journey to empower others. One of Bollywood's famous actresses, Sridevi Kapoor, who was also a film producer whose achievements were recognized as Bollywood's first female star, died suddenly in 2018 due to drowning in a bathtub at a luxury hotel in Dubai. Her death invited many questions from various levels of society. Was her death purely accidental, or whether there is a fraudulent act being covered up? Today we will discuss the strange case of Sridevi Kapoor's death and its latest investigation. The legendary actress, whose full name is Sri Amma Yangar Ayyappan, known professionally as Sridevi, was born on August 19, 1963 in Mianampati, Madras State, India, to parents who worked as lawyers. Her mother taught Sridevi to speak Tamil until she was fluent. Sridevi discovered her hidden talent in acting when she was only 4 years old, where she played in a Tamil language film entitled Kannan Karanai, which was released in 1967. Since then, Sridevi has always had roles in various films every year, until she received various awards as the best actress in India. Apart from speaking Tamil, she is also fluent in Telugu, Hindi, Malayalam, and Canadian. The dances she performed in each film scene also amazed the producers and the Indian public, so that she always received big role offers and became recognized as the first female actress and first female star in Bollywood from 1985 to 1993. Sridevi became the highest paid actress in India in a row from 1985 to 1993. This made her sought after by famous Hollywood directors and producers, including Steven Spielberg, to star in famous Hollywood films such as Jurassic Park in 1993. But, after various considerations, Sridevi finally rejected the offer. Like other actresses, Sridevi has also been hit by unpleasant rumors due to rumors of snatch someone's husband in the household of actor Mithun Chakraborty and actress Yogita Bali. She was suspected of having an affair from 1986 to 1987 with Mithun, but the rumors soon died down when Mithun did not divorce his wife and still maintains their relationship till now. Behind her beautiful face and stunning acting roles, Sridevi was once called an arrogant actress, but she clarified that her silence was misinterpreted. Actually, she is a shy girl, even though her name is famous everywhere because she started acting at 4 years old. So she never received formal education and experienced free interaction with her school friends, which formed her as an introverted person. As a result, she was always accompanied by her mother when she was on set. Even when Sridevi was an adult, her mother always accompanied her. In 1995, when Sridevi was 32 years old, she met a famous producer from the Kapoor family named Boney Kapoor. But this introduction again drew harsh criticism when Boney divorced his first wife, Mona Shori, whom he had been married to since 1983 and had given birth to 2 children. Shortly after his divorce in 1996, Boney married Sridevi, which made Sridevi known as a woman who destroyed other people's homes. From that marriage, Sridevi and Boney were blessed with 2 daughters. The first was Janhavi Kapoor, born in 1997, and Kushi Kapoor, born in 2000. Both of them are now famous actresses in India, following in their parents' footsteps. Unfortunately, Sridevi also felt extraordinary sadness. After giving birth to her first child while filming a film, her mother, who had always accompanied her during every filming, had to experience serious complications in 1997 due to brain tumor surgery which she underwent in 1995. After investigation, a neurosurgeon discovered that there had been a procedural error. Surgery by performing surgery on the wrong part of her mother's head. This causes damage to vital tissues and nerve centers related to vision and memory. Only a few weeks after complications, her mother died, leaving Sridevi with deep sorrow so much, so that she decided to take a hiatus from the world of entertainment for 15 years. In 2012, Sridevi returned to the world and made her name by appearing in several films. Sridevi's return to the world of film made the film she played in a huge success. This made Sridevi's name the single most successful comeback actress in Bollywood history after a long hiatus. In 2013, she also received many awards for her films and roles after her comeback. In 2017, Sridevi signed a contract with the production house to play a film entitled Kalank, which was planned to be released in 2018. But, during the filming process, Sridevi was found to have died suddenly in Dubai, so the filming process had to be restarted from the start and role was replaced by Madhuri Dixit, and the film's release was postponed to 2019. Actually, what happened to Sridevi? How did she die? And what irregularities were discovered during the investigation into his death? On that day, Sridevi's husband, Boney, and her youngest daughter, Kushi, traveled all the way to the United Arab Emirates to attend the wedding of their nephew, Indian actor Mohit Marwah, which was held at the luxury Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Ras Al Khaimah city, 6th largest city in Arabia. Unfortunately, their eldest daughter, Janhavi, couldn't go there to accompany her mother, because she had to finish shooting. Janhavi sends a shopping list to her mother as a birthday gift. In early March, after the wedding party finished on February 21, 2018, Sridevi, accompanied by her husband and youngest daughter, went shopping and traveled around the country for a full day. They planned to return to India the next day, on February 22, 2018, to head to Lucknow City, Uttar Pradesh state. But, when she was leaving by plane, Sridevi realized that she had left her cell phone in the Waldorf Astoria hotel room. She returned to the hotel and let her husband and daughter go first to India. She said that she would follow to Lucknow City, but actually, Sridevi planned to stay in that country for the next few days so that she could take advantage of her relaxing time from her filming activities. Sridevi also called Boni to express how much she missed him. Boni suggested that Sridevi continue her journey to Dubai, so she could enjoy her holiday in the United Arab Emirates. Sridevi agreed and booked a room at the Jumeirah Emirates Tower Hotel for several nights starting on February 22, 2018. Apparently, Boni advised Sridevi to go to Dubai because he had planned to surprise her by secretly visiting his wife in Dubai on February 24, 2018. Boni called Sridevi again to make up a story so that his wife would stay at the hotel and not return to India. In the afternoon, Boni took a flight from Lucknow to Dubai and explained to Sridevi that he was attending an important meeting, so he would turn off his cell phone in the next few hours after arriving in Dubai. He arrived at the Jumeirah Emirates Tower Hotel, where Sridevi was staying at around 18:30 p.m. He also checked in secretly and asked the hotel receptionist for a duplicate access card to his wife's room. When Boni entered room 2201, Sridevi couldn't contain her excitement, so Sridevi, who was supposed to be shopping again that night, decided to postpone her shopping because Boni invited Sridevi to enjoy a romantic dinner at a luxury restaurant. Boni is sure that his surprise on his wife was successful. Sridevi, who was very happy, immediately went to the bathroom to shower and prepare, while Boni sat in the living room of their room and watched TV while waiting for his wife. But after half an hour had passed, around 7 p.m., Boni didn't see his wife leaving the bathroom and he knew that dinner would be late. Boni knocked on the bathroom door, but there was no answer, so he went inside. Apparently, the bathroom was not locked, but that's where he saw Sridevi's body immersed from head to toe in the bathtub. Boni immediately called the hotel staff and called the Dubai City Police. From the results of the interim investigation, Dubai police confirmed that there were no drops of water coming out of the bathtub, so it is believed there were no signs of movement or resistance. Officially, Sridevi was declared dead on February 24, 2018 at 18:30 p.m. due to accidental drowning. Sridevi's sudden death shocked India and her fans internationally. After the autopsy process was carried out, Sridevi's body was taken back to India for religious ceremonies and cremation. Hundreds of thousands of Sridevi fans from various places filled the funeral and took her body to the crematorium. The whole country is mourning the loss of a talented, legendary actress. Even her fellow actresses in the film Kalink also felt the loss, especially since the filming process had not yet been completed. So the director and producer had to rack their brains and immediately reshoot and then contract another artist to replace Sridevi. On May 3, 2018, Boni and her two daughters traveled to Tamil Nadu with Abu Sridevi to be released at Rameswaram Beach. An atmosphere of emotion surrounded the release of the ashes. On March 11, 2018, Sridevi's family held a private prayer ceremony and gave an opportunity to Bollywood actors and actresses to pay their last respects to Sridevi. After the series of ceremonies had finished, the discussion about Sridevi's death had not yet ended. Many parties have clearly voiced an investigation into the death of their idol, because the world does not believe that Sridevi died due to accidental drowning in the bathroom. One by one, the irregularities in Sridevi's death began to be revealed and became a heated discussion among the public. In fact, the initial suspicion that Sridevi died was not due to drowning, because apart from the fact that Boni's story did not make sense, the authenticity of the documents released stating that Sridevi died was also questioned. The document wrote the cause of death as accidental drowning instead of accidental drowning, a spelling error in English that caused further public distrust. In this case, the public is increasingly cornering the grieving Boni as the murderer. But the extended Kapoor family came forward to defend Boni. Boni's younger brother, an actor named Sanjay Kapoor, defended his brother. He said that Sridevi died of a heart attack before she drowned in the bathtub. But his statement sparked a long debate because it was known that Sridevi had no history of heart disease and looked very healthy. The results of the toxicology examination, which had been kept hidden, also stated that alcohol content was found in Sridevi's blood and water in her lungs. This proves that Sridevi was still trying to breathe when she was in the water. From here, the public believes that there are many things that the big Kapoor family is trying to hide. When people question Sridevi's death, surprisingly, Sunil Singh, an artistic director, film writer and music director who had worked in the Bollywood industry since 1982, revealed that Sridevi's death was the result of murder. In fact, in his statement, he has also made research and accused clearly that Boney Kapoor, her own husband, had killed Sridevi. Sunil said that in recent years, Boney had experienced a significant financial decline. Moreover, the new films produced by Boney could no longer explode at the box office. The first film produced by Boney was a big success in 2005 when he appointed Salman Khan to play in his film entitled No Entry. And his last successful film produced was in 2009 entitled Wanted, which still starred Salman Khan. But since 2010, Boney and Salman's relationship has been fractured because Boney's son, an actor named Arjun Kapoor, from a previous marriage, was dating Salman's sister-in-law, Arpita Khan, from 2003 to 2005, and still continues to pursue Arpita after they separated. Arjun even approached Salman's other sister-in-law, Malaika Aurora, until Malaika divorced her husband. This creates tension between Salman and Boney, so Salman tells Boney to stay away from his family. As a result of this strained relationship, Boney's films did not sell well, and Boney is known to have sold one of his properties to fulfill all the needs of his glamorous life. He also fought to maintain the social status of the Kapoor family in the film industry, until speculation emerged that Boney planned Sridevi's death to seize all her assets. Sunil also finally submitted his research to the court to ask the police to carry out an investigation. Even Sunil's lawyer also revealed something more surprising, that they had found files on Sridevi's life insurance policy in Oman worth $35 million, which could only be claimed if Sridevi died in Dubai. This made international headlines at the time, further shining a spotlight on the Kapoor family. But, unfortunately, the court rejected Sunil Singh's application because it considered that the United Arab Emirates police no longer found any suspicion about Sridevi's death. Amid these suspicions, an assistant commissioner of New Delhi police named Ved Bhushan also expressed his own theory. He believed that Sridevi showed signs of death due to premeditated murder. He also claimed that United Arab Emirates police officials mistakenly determined that Sridevi's cause of death was drowning. He also speculated that it was possible that Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar, a leader of India's largest cartel who organized an international crime syndicate, was involved in the case. Ved Bhushan even went directly to Dubai and stayed for several days at the hotel where Sridevi was staying to unravel the mystery of her death. As time went by, people began to believe in the theories that were revealed. Even netizens are also paying attention to the last photo uploaded by Sridevi on her Instagram account on February 22, 2018, which shows that she still looks healthy and happy at her nephew's wedding. But, after the photo was uploaded, Sridevi was no longer seen leaving the hotel room or around Dubai City. The hotel staff also said that Sridevi had never left the room since she first checked in, while the wedding guests admitted that the last time they saw Sridevi was at the party. However, there are also those who defend Boney Kapoor by saying that Sridevi's death may have been caused by a drug overdose, so Boney discovered it, created a story and made it look like she died by drowning. This was probably done so that Sridevi was not thought to have died of an overdose and was not remembered as a drug addict. On August 13, 2019, the renowned Madame Tussauds Wax Museum Singapore announced that they would be creating a wax statue of Sridevi to honor her achievements in Bollywood. When the inauguration of Sridevi's wax statue was held, Boney Kapoor and her two daughters, Janvi and Kushi, attended the event and posed for photos with their mother's wax statue. 2 years after his name continued to be cornered as Sridevi Kapoor's killer, Boney Kapoor finally opened his voice and revealed that he had been silent all this time because he was still grieving. Boney also admitted that he was innocent. He explained that after finding his wife dead in the bathtub, He was taken by Dubai police and interrogated for 18 hours straight. In fact, he was questioned again for 48 hours, but Dubai police did not find anything wrong with him. So he was released to attend to his wife's cremation ceremony. Boni also claimed that he had taken a polygraph test that showed he was not lying. He emphasized that he could not have killed his own wife because he had never had problems at home. Although many people believed Boni's words, many more thought that Boni was acting. Various methods have been used by those who believe that Sridevi was murdered to reopen the investigation. But all their efforts were in vain, as the court still viewed the legendary actress' death as an accident. On November 12, 2023, a well-known entrepreneur and activist from India named Deepti Panaiti suddenly revealed the results of her investigation, which had been carried out with her team from various related professions. She had ample evidence to show that Sridevi was indeed murdered, as per Sunil Singh and Ved Bhushan's statements several years earlier. Deepti stated that Boni Kapoor was involved in the murder and involved many other individuals who had the potential to be Sridevi's killer. Deepti said that there was some autopsy evidence that was deliberately hidden by several parties to remain secret. One of the surprising results of the autopsy was the presence of large needle injection marks on Sridevi's body, which appeared to have been around for a long time because they were almost closed. Apart from that, it turns out that Sridevi did not die on February 24, 2018, as reported by the media and documents released, but on February 23, 2018 at 18:30 Dubai time. The autopsy results also showed that mamushi poison was found in Sridevi's blood, a poison from the most dangerous species of mamushi snake found in Japan. Sridevi had been injected with the poison 130 hours or 5 days before her death while still in India. The killer injected the poison along with milk solids to delay the reaction of the poison in the body, damaging several organs and nerves in Sridevi's body. The killer hoped that Sridevi would die in the wedding party while dancing at the event, so that no one could find out the real cause of death. But it seems that the poison was too slow to react, so Sridevi remained healthy during the wedding party. Therefore, the killers took Sridevi away from the party location in Ras Al Khaimah city to Dubai city, which is 100 kilometers away, to stay at the Jumeirah Emirates Tower Hotel. According to Deepti, Sridevi's reason for vacationing alone in Dubai doesn't make sense, considering the busy shooting schedule for the film, Kalink, and the presence of her family who are still in Ras Al Khaimah city, while her husband and daughter have returned to India. In fact, based on the testimony of staff hotel, Sridevi never left the room since checking in at room 2201. Deepti suspects that Sridevi was murdered by drowning in a tub of water while in her hotel room. Deepti also alleged that Boni Kapoor pretended to travel from India to Dubai to surprise Sridevi, even though he wanted to make sure Sridevi was really dead. Through collaboration with various parties, Boni succeeded in changing Sridevi's death date from February 23 to February 24. What do you think? Do you believe that Sridevi, a famous legendary actress in India, died because of her husband's actions? Which theory do you believe? I hope that with Deepti's efforts to voice injustice again, the authorities in India can be heard, and the real perpetrators can be punished for their actions. Still with me? Good, that means you're ready for the rest. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more cases just like this one. It was supposed to be the best day of Gladys Ricart's life. Dressed in her wedding gown, she moved around her home, sharing happy moments with family and friends as they all got ready for the big day. Laughter filled the air, and photographers snapped every joyful smile. But outside, someone from her past was watching from his car, unable to let her go. He waited, growing more tense with every passing moment, until finally he decided to go inside. Gladys' family, busy with last-minute details, didn't notice him at first. What happened next would change everything for everyone there that day. Gladys Ricart was born on October 15, 1960, in a small town in the Dominican Republic. She was raised by her mother, Ana Rosario, a single mother of 4. Gladys had 3 siblings, Norma, Yolanda, and Juan. The names of their fathers remained unknown, but Ana kept her children close and instilled strong family values in them. From a young age, Gladys stood out for her compassionate nature, consistently displaying kindness and empathy. She shared a particularly close bond with her older sister Norma. Even as a teenager, Gladys dreamed big. Her ambitions included becoming a successful professional, having a beautiful wedding, and starting her own family. However, she knew that achieving these dreams would require dedication to her studies. In 1978, shortly after graduating high school, 18-year-old Gladys fell in love and became pregnant. Unfortunately, the relationship ended, and the following year, she gave birth to her son alone. The child's father, whose family background remains unknown, never took responsibility for him. Determined to provide for her son, Gladys decided to set aside her academic pursuits. Raising him was challenging, but her son became a source of immense joy and strength for Gladys, encouraging her to move forward. Gladys eventually secured a stable job to support her son. Around this time, her sister Norma had moved to New York with her 2 daughters. Gladys began to consider joining her sister, hoping that relocating to the United States would offer her and her son better opportunities. She worked tirelessly to save up, while her other siblings, Juan and Yolanda, also moved to join Norma in the U.S. In 1978, Gladys was in 1983. At the age of 22, Gladys finally saved enough money to move, though she couldn't afford to bring her son with her at that time. He stayed behind in the care of his grandmother. Upon arriving in New York, Gladys settled in the heart of the Dominican immigrant community in Manhattan, close to her sister and nieces. With her priorities set, she started working as and soon enrolled in a local college to study accounting. Days turned into years, and by 1987, Gladys was able to bring her son to the U.S., fulfilling a long-held dream. They moved into a comfortable apartment where they lived with her sister and nieces. This marked a joyful time in Gladys' life, as she was surrounded by her loved ones, who admired her courage and optimism. In 1992, while on her routine commute to work via the New York City subway, Gladys caught the attention of a man named Agustin Garcia, who happened to be on the same train. Born in the Dominican Republic in 1952, Agustin had moved to New York as a child with his parents. With ambition and hard work, he established himself as a successful businessman, founding a multi-service agency in Manhattan during the 1980s. He also created a bilingual newspaper for the Dominican community, aiming to keep them informed and connected. Agustin was well respected in his community. After his first marriage ended in divorce, he was granted custody of his 2 children and settled with them in New Jersey. His success allowed him to expand into various business ventures across the city. He even founded the Federation of Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, committed to empowering the community. Known for his sociable personality, Agustin treated everyone kindly, gaining a reputation as a charming and approachable figure. That day on the subway, Agustin felt that fate had brought him and Gladys together. Despite rarely using the subway, their encounter led to a brief conversation, during which Agustin managed to get her phone number, promising to see her again. Fascinated by her warmth and beauty, Agustin began courting Gladys, showering her with lavish gifts and taking her to upscale restaurants and places she had never experienced before. Their meeting would mark the start of a new chapter in Gladys's life, filled with excitement and unexpected turns. Gradually, Gladys and Agustin's relationship deepened, with Agustin sparing no expense to show his affection. After about a year of dating, he proposed they move in together, and Gladys agreed, yet a yearning lingered in her heart. Gladys deeply wanted marriage and a family with Agustin, but he seemed resistant to the idea. Meanwhile, tensions arose between her son and Agustin's children. Hoping to smooth things over, Gladys encouraged her son to be patient, believing that the children just needed time to adjust. Unfortunately, the reality proved to be more challenging, as Gladys noticed Agustin often seemed indifferent to her son. After 2 years of living together, the unresolved issues prompted Gladys to suggest they live apart. Though saddened, Agustin agreed, even helping her find a new home. In 1995, with his financial support, Gladys purchased a lovely 2-story house in New Jersey, conveniently close to Agustin's residence. From then on, Agustin proudly introduced Gladys as his wife to friends, family, and the Dominican community in the U.S., projecting an image of a partnership. Yet behind the public facade, their relationship faced serious strains. Augustine had multiple affairs, which Gladys eventually discovered. This deeply hurt her, and her once vibrant personality began to dim. Many assumed her sadness stemmed from Augustine's reluctance to marry, so they chose not to pry. Whenever marriage was brought up, Augustine dismissed the idea, saying he didn't want to risk another divorce. Gladys, however, longed for the security of marriage and made her feelings known. Gradually, she also began to confide in friends about Augustine's infidelities and his increasingly controlling and possessive behavior, which led to frequent arguments. During one heated confrontation, Augustine, completely out of control, threatened her with a firearm. Terrified, Gladys sought comfort in her sister's support. Then, in the fall of 1998, Gladys unexpectedly visited Augustine's office and found him in a compromising situation with a younger woman. This was the final straw. She immediately ended the relationship and, with her family's support, decided to cut him out of her life. But Augustine was not ready to let go, treating her more as a possession than a partner. He began persistently calling and leaving gifts at her door, from roses to Bibles, but Gladys disregarded these attempts. By March 1999, Gladys had moved on emotionally, feeling a newfound sense of freedom and hope. Around this time, during a lunch break at a nearby restaurant, she met James Preston, a 40-year-old accountant with a passion for music. They hit it off instantly, enjoying a lively conversation and deciding to stay in touch. As they went on more dates, James proved to be kind, considerate, and attentive to Gladys and her family. For the first time in years, Gladys felt truly happy, something her family noticed and celebrated. Only 2 months after they met, James proposed to her with a ring, and Gladys, overjoyed, accepted. Gladys was finally on the brink of the happy ending she had always dreamed of. Their families and friends joined in the excitement, helping with wedding plans and even involving the neighbors in the celebration. Gladys and James set the wedding date for Sunday, September 26, 1999. However, when Augustine heard about her engagement, he became increasingly desperate to win her back. His calls intensified, and he would often park near her house at night, watching from his car and noting down the license plates of visitors. Though several neighbors noticed him lurking, Gladys remained unaware of his behavior until the night of August 12, 1999. That evening, while she and James were enjoying a quiet night at home, Augustine showed up unexpectedly at her door. Augustine arrived at Gladys' door with a calm demeanor, asking her to let him in so they could talk. But Gladys, sensing his true intentions, firmly refused. When he realized she wasn't going to let him in, Augustine's facade fell, and his anger surfaced. He began throwing stones at her windows, frightening Gladys enough to call emergency services. Within minutes, a patrol car arrived, and officers restrained Augustine. However, Gladys decided not to press charges, hoping the incident would scare him into leaving her alone. She only wanted peace and to focus on her upcoming wedding, but Augustine's obsession would not end there. On September 24, 1999, just 2 days before her wedding, Gladys went out late in the evening to pick up a last-minute item for her bridesmaids. She didn't realize that Augustine was following her. Inside the store, he approached her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as if they were a couple, and walked alongside her throughout the aisles. Security cameras captured this encounter. Afterward, they parted ways, but the incident left Gladys feeling unnerved. She sensed that Augustine was becoming increasingly dangerous. Then, the morning of her wedding day, September 26, 1999, arrived. Friends and family gathered at her home as photographers and videographers captured joyful moments of the bride and groom preparing. Outside, a classic car and 2 limousines awaited to transport everyone to a church in Queens. The bride, radiant and surrounded by loved ones, took photos with her 19-year-old son and her mother, who had traveled from the Dominican Republic for the occasion. Meanwhile, Augustine drove by slowly, observing every movement from his car, hoping to catch a glimpse of Gladys. He circled the block several times until one of Gladys' nieces recognized him. Inside the house, unaware of Augustine's presence, Gladys was handing out flowers to her bridesmaids when he parked directly in front of her home. He placed a gun in his bag and a few extra bullets in his pocket before heading to the front door. Augustine made his way into the house, with Gladys' brother trying to keep a close eye on him. Upon seeing Gladys in her tiara and wedding dress, Augustine ignored everyone else in the room, pulling out his gun and, in a moment of rage, fired at her. The horrific scene was captured on film by the cameramen who were there for the wedding. Though Gladys' brother Juan attempted to intervene, it was too late. Gladys had been hit by 3 bullets and was fatally wounded. Juan and Augustine then struggled, as others called emergency services. Police and paramedics arrived to find the 2 men still fighting, with Augustine yelling that he wanted to end his own life. Officers eventually separated them and restrained both. Paramedics tried desperately to revive Gladys, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. News crews arrived quickly and the story began spreading across local stations. Norma, Gladys' sister, learned of the tragedy from the news and rushed to the house in shock. James, Gladys' fiancé, was waiting at the church, assuming his bride's delay was due to wedding preparations. But when someone broke the news to him, his day of joy turned into a nightmare. Augustine was taken into custody and investigators swiftly began piecing together the crime. Surveillance footage and the extra bullets found in his pockets were clear evidence. In his car, police discovered a list of license plate numbers from vehicles parked near Gladys' home. Forensic examinations revealed 3 gunshot wounds on Gladys, one in her upper arm, another in her spine, and the fatal one to her head. During his initial interrogation, Augustine claimed he had simply planned to stop by and hadn't intended to harm Gladys. But when pressed by investigators, he finally admitted to the killing, expressing regret for what had happened. The following day, September 27, 1999, Augustine appeared in court for his first hearing. Despite his claim of innocence, he was charged with murder, illegal possession of a firearm, and endangering the lives of minors present at the scene. The judge set Augustine's bail at $5 million, and he was confined to county jail to await trial. On October 1, 1999, Gladys' funeral was held, attended by a large number of people, including the investigators working on her case. Loved ones gathered around her casket, where she lay dressed in her wedding gown to bid their final farewell. Later that day, Gladys' family, along with James' relatives, traveled to the Dominican Republic to bury her. Due to the high-profile nature of the crime and Augustine's status, the case quickly gained widespread media attention in both the Dominican Republic and the United States. The trial was scheduled for early October 2001. During preliminary hearings, Augustine's defense introduced an alternative version of events, holding press conferences where they argued he had acted in self-defense against an attack by Gladys' brother. They claimed Augustine never intended to harm Gladys. From that point, the defense pursued an aggressive strategy, aiming to tarnish Gladys' public image to sway opinion in Augustine's favor. The defense team suggested that, although Gladys was engaged to James, she had supposedly maintained a secret relationship with Augustine. They argued that jealousy had driven him to kill her impulsively and requested the charges be downgraded to involuntary manslaughter, which would result in a lighter sentence of 10 years in prison under New Jersey law. This tactic found some traction in the community, where gossip began circulating that Augustine was actually a victim of heartbreak, with some saying Gladys had brought it upon herself. However, on the first anniversary of Gladys' death, a Dominican-born woman in Miami, deeply moved by the story, started a campaign to raise awareness about domestic violence and support victims. She wore her wedding dress while participating in a marathon, sparking a powerful movement that led other women to join her each year in what became known as the Bridal March. Gladys' family joined this initiative, attending press conferences and supporting the cause to preserve her memory and stand against domestic violence. The defense, meanwhile, continued its efforts, holding public discussions about the case. This led the prosecution to ask the judge to issue a gag order, which was granted. Yet, much of the damage was already done as rumors persisted in the community. The prosecution knew that showing the wedding video footage, which captured the tragic moment, was crucial for their case. a move Gladys' family supported in the hope of attaining justice. On February 14, 2001, a hearing was held where only the judge viewed the footage while the courtroom heard the audio. For Gladys' family, it was a painful experience, and the defense argued the video was an unfair advantage for the prosecution. Ultimately, the judge allowed only the segments showing the shooting itself. The trial began on October 2, 2001. The defense maintained that Augustin had been overwhelmed by the news of Gladys' upcoming wedding, and that he was only defending himself from her brother and son. They presented footage from a security camera at the store Gladys visited 2 days before the wedding, attempting to imply she and Augustin had maintained a romantic relationship, despite evidence to the contrary. This line of defense initially appeared to sway the jury, but when the prosecution played the wedding video, it became clear that Augustin had not been attacked by anyone else in the room and had directly targeted Gladys. On October 16, 2001, Augustin testified, claiming he had lost consciousness after allegedly being attacked. However, on October 23, 2001, the jury found him guilty on all charges. The verdict brought a sense of relief to Gladys' family, who celebrated this step toward justice amidst their grief. Months later, in February 2002, the judge sentenced the 50-year-old Augustin to life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Augustin, now incarcerated in New Jersey State Prison, has since refused to discuss the case publicly. He reportedly found religion, becoming a preacher, but his requests for parole have repeatedly been denied. Gladys' story left an indelible mark on the community and spread nationwide. The bridal march, born from this tragedy, has continued for over 2 decades. The march, symbolized by black sunglasses and veils to hide bruises, represents solidarity with victims and an effort to raise awareness. The event, supported by donations from local authorities and private donors, has provided a safe space for countless victims of violence, encouraging them to seek help and overcome fear. On a quiet November evening in 2015, a 911 dispatcher picked up a call that sounded urgent and filled with panic. On the other end was a woman named Jennifer, frantically explaining that her young daughter was choking on a piece of chicken. She sounded desperate, saying she had tried everything to help, her fingers, even a butter knife, but nothing seemed to work. The dispatcher calmly instructed her to perform CPR, guiding her step by step. 13 long minutes passed as Jennifer's panic grew, and then suddenly silence. When paramedics finally arrived, they found the little girl motionless, but something didn't add up. Her injuries didn't look like those from choking, and as they examined her, more unsettling questions popped up. Bruises and marks on her small body hinted at a different story, one that didn't match Jennifer's explanation. So, who was Jennifer and what really happened that night? The answers, buried beneath layers of secrets, would shock everyone and reveal a truth no one was prepared for. Layla Marie Daniel was born on July 18, 2013, in Georgia, USA. Her parents, Tessa Daniel and Anthony, faced challenging circumstances early in life. 2 years before Layla's birth, Tessa had another daughter, Millie Place. Both Tessa and Anthony grew up in difficult environments. Tessa, from a young age, encountered significant struggles that led her into the child care system, spending her formative years in various foster homes. Anthony's experiences were similarly challenging, and when he and Tessa decided to build a life together, they lacked the stability needed to create the nurturing family they had envisioned. Unfortunately, their children ended up in a home marked by instability and toxic dynamics, as both Tessa and Anthony struggled with substance abuse and alcohol issues, compounded by a history of arrests. In light of these conditions, Child and Family Services began conducting regular home visits. Their mission was to assess the well-being of the girls, ensuring they were receiving proper care from their parents. The results were consistently discouraging. Initial reports noted domestic violence, and a later report documented that the living conditions were unsafe after one of the girls left the house unnoticed by her mother. When Layla was 1, Tessa's substance issues escalated, leading to her hospitalization for treatment, and the family situation continued to deteriorate. Millie went to live with her grandmother while Layla stayed with a family friend, Cynthia Tate, who provided a stable and loving environment. Despite Cynthia's care, Tessa's situation worsened, and in January 2015, she was arrested on methamphetamine distribution charges, resulting in a 3-month prison sentence. Layla's father, Anthony, was also incarcerated during this time, leaving the girls in the care of their grandmother and Cynthia once more. Upon Tessa's release, she moved in with Cynthia but was required by family services to undergo a drug test, which she failed. Consequently, the authorities decided to place Millie and Layla in foster care under the supervision of Loretta Brown, an experienced foster mother who aimed to provide the girls with a more secure environment. By then, Layla was 21 months old and Millie was 4. Despite receiving love and care in several foster homes, social services continued moving the girls, striving to find the most suitable long-term placement. Meanwhile, Tessa remained actively involved in the adoption proceedings, determined not to lose custody of her daughters, hoping to reunite with them after achieving full rehabilitation. In May 2015, Millie and Layla were placed with Jennifer and Joseph Rosenbaum, a couple eager to provide temporary care, despite not being formally designated as foster parents by a placement agency. Jennifer, 27 at the time, shared a turbulent past with Tessa. Raised in an unstable and violent environment, she also dealt with a physically abusive mother struggling with addiction, leading Jennifer into foster care at age 9. Despite difficulties controlling her anger and a history of altercations, Jennifer eventually found direction, graduating high school and enlisting in the Army. She later pursued a law degree and gained respect in her community, even appearing on television and interning in a district attorney's office. In 2009, she married Joseph Rosenbaum, whom she had met years prior within the foster system. By the time of their wedding, Joseph was working as a corrections officer. Their relationship was seen as complementary, with Jennifer being assertive and controlling, while Joseph, who suffered from cystic fibrosis, was described as gentle and reserved. This complex situation became an opportunity for Jennifer to craft an image of herself on social media as a savior, portraying both her and her husband Joseph as fighters overcoming adversity. With Joseph's struggle against cystic fibrosis, a disease that often significantly shortens life expectancy, Jennifer found herself particularly determined to build a family. Due to the illness, many men with cystic fibrosis are unable to have children. Yet Jennifer was resolute in creating a family of her own, announcing her intentions publicly, and making clear she would stop at nothing. Their first application to become foster parents, however, was denied. Jennifer had used her maiden name, and officials discovered her history in the child welfare system, including reports of physical mistreatment. This background disqualified her as a candidate for temporary motherhood. Undeterred, Jennifer submitted a second application under her married name, hoping her history would remain hidden. This time, she was asked to attend foster parenting workshops, and a detailed background check was initiated. Jennifer, however, was unwilling to be evaluated, seeing herself as an exceptional candidate given her own challenging upbringing and rapid achievements. She believed any child would be fortunate to have her as an adoptive mother, and the assessment process infuriated her. In a heated phone conversation with a child services worker, Jennifer lost her composure, responding harshly and even issuing threats. Her application was immediately denied. But in April 2015, while working in the courthouse, Jennifer spotted a familiar face, Tessa's grandmother. Seizing this opportunity, Jennifer conducted her own unauthorized research into Tessa's case, uncovering everything about the ongoing adoption search for Layla and Millie, and Tessa's role in the process. She crafted a meticulous plan, contacting Tessa through social media and rekindling their connection from childhood. Presenting herself as a compassionate figure, Jennifer offered to take in the girls, promising them a loving home. At that time, Jennifer's life seemed almost ideal. She was preparing to run for a county commission seat in her 3rd year of law school, and had gained a promising reputation with a strong social standing and financial security. Her life appeared to offer a world of possibilities for Layla and Millie, convincing Tessa that this was the right choice. Feeling hopeful, Tessa contacted the case's social worker, requesting that her daughters meet the Rosenbaums. Soon, Layla and Millie began visiting the Rosenbaum home. Despite being 2, Layla was not yet speaking and had inconsistent eating habits, while 4-year-old Millie acted protectively toward her younger sister. During these visits, the sister's temporary caregiver, Patricia Lambert, who meticulously documented everything related to the girl's care, noticed concerning signs. After visits to the Rosenbaums, the girls would return with burns and bruises. Patricia reported these incidents to social services, but her concerns went unaddressed. Persisting, Patricia even brought the girls directly to the agency, supporting her claims with photographs, but still no action was taken. Speculation arose that Jennifer, leveraging her professional connections, influenced the outcome. Jennifer even claimed the injuries occurred during visits with the girls' biological family, a false statement that could have been disproven had Patricia's records been reviewed. Ultimately, the system failed the girls. On July 24, 2015, a judge ordered that Layla and Millie be permanently placed with Jennifer and Joseph, bypassing essential requirements and paperwork needed to finalize their status as adoptive parents. After the girls moved in, Jennifer emailed Tessa, falsely stating that social services had mandated no visits for at least 30 days to allow the girls to adjust. Even after this period, Jennifer continued to fabricate reasons to restrict contact between the girls and their biological family, tightening her control and severing family connections entirely. Amid the ongoing manipulation, Tessa discovered she was pregnant again. Jennifer, who seemed intent on gaining custody of this new child as well, needed to keep lines of communication open and avoid further tension. Tessa, still somewhat trusting, often asked Jennifer to send her photos of her daughters. Although Jennifer had roughly 2,000 photos of Millie on her phone, she sent only the oldest ones. When Tessa specifically asked for a recent picture of Layla, Jennifer reluctantly obliged. The photo showed Layla with an injury near her eye, which Jennifer attributed to an accident at daycare, a false claim as Layla wasn't enrolled in any such program. The case was overseen by a social worker tasked with making monthly home visits, documenting observations, and conducting private interviews with each girl to assess their physical and emotional well-being. However, none of the reports from these visits indicated any signs of trouble. Then, in August 2015, a neighbor noticed bruising around both of Layla's eyes. Jennifer explained that Layla had fallen down the stairs and hit her nose. Unconvinced, the neighbor, a nurse, urged Jennifer to take Layla to the children's hospital immediately. Hours later, realizing Jennifer hadn't sought medical care, the neighbor confronted her again, stressing the potential severity of head injuries in young children. Jennifer promised she would go the next day. Such concerning incidents continued. In October 2015, Layla sustained a leg injury, later diagnosed as a fracture at the emergency room. Jennifer claimed it happened during a gymnastics class at her grandmother's house, a statement that was later disproved when it was revealed Layla wasn't enrolled in any such activity. Then, on the night of November 17, 2015, a 911 operator received a frantic call from Jennifer. She reported that her young adopted daughter was struggling to breathe, supposedly choking on a piece of chicken. For over 13 minutes, the operator provided CPR instructions, but Jennifer claimed she was too afraid of performing the procedure incorrectly. In her panic, she described trying to dislodge the food with her fingers and even using a butter knife. Tragically, Layla passed away moments before paramedics arrived. Upon arrival, paramedics attempted resuscitation, but it was too late. They noticed concerning injuries on Layla, including marks on her back. When asked about them, Jennifer claimed she had no knowledge of their origin, citing Layla's adoption. At the hospital, further examination revealed a disturbing number of injuries, prompting staff to alert social services and authorities. Millie was also brought to the hospital, where she was found to have bruises in various stages of healing on her hip, head, arm, and back, clear signs of child abuse. A nurse noted that while Millie's injuries weren't as severe as Layla's, they were nonetheless concerning. This discovery led police to investigate the home environment, eventually moving Millie back to Patricia's care. The following day, on November 18, 2015, an autopsy on Layla revealed extensive injuries, including numerous bruises and fractures. The cause of death was identified as blunt force trauma to the abdomen rather than airway obstruction, as Jennifer had claimed. With these findings, Jennifer and Joseph were arrested. They posted bail and returned home, causing outrage within the biological family and the community. The case also sent shockwaves through the Child Welfare Department, leading to the dismissal of the two social workers responsible for overseeing Layla and Millie's case after an internal review found they had ignored critical warning signs that could have prevented the abuse. In July 2019, the trial against the Rosenbaums began, with 49 charges, including murder, aggravated assault, and child cruelty in relation to Layla's death and Millie's injuries. Both Jennifer and Joseph pleaded not guilty, with Jennifer's defense claiming she unintentionally caused Layla's injuries while attempting to remove food from her throat. However, Millie's heart-wrenching testimony recounted specific incidents of physical punishment inflicted by Jennifer on both her and Layla, exposing the brutality of their treatment. In October 2019, both were found guilty. Jennifer was sentenced to life in prison plus 40 years, while Joseph received 50 years, with 30 in prison and 20 on probation. Jennifer appealed her sentence, arguing ineffective representation, but the state Supreme Court denied her appeal in March 2023. Layla's tragic death and Millie's harrowing experiences sparked intense public debate on foster care oversight and child protection laws, highlighting how a single failure in the system can lead to catastrophic consequences for vulnerable children. As the sun set in a quiet Florida neighborhood, neighbors were startled by sudden shouts and urgent knocks on their doors. Ashley Benefield appeared on a neighbor's doorstep, holding a gun and looking terrified. She pleaded for help, saying she had no choice but to defend herself. Inside her home, Douglas Benefield lay badly injured as paramedics rushed in, and police began securing the area. How had things come to this point? Was it just the result of built-up tension? Or was there something deeper and more troubling in their relationship? Douglas Benefield was born on October 2, 1961, in Palo Alto, California. He was the second child of John and his wife, Suzanne, who had 3 children in total: Wesley, Douglas, and David. Suzanne, a teacher, and John, an aerospace engineer, upheld values of discipline and hard work in their home. John's career later took the family to Huntsville, Alabama, a city known for its role in advanced aerospace development. Douglas thrived in this environment, displaying curiosity and enthusiasm. He was especially close to his brother David, and together they often attended church camps organized by their mother, who was actively involved in the religious community. As Douglas entered high school, he joined the wrestling team, which allowed him to channel his dedication and passion. He quickly became one of the school's top wrestlers, inspiring his younger brother David, who would later follow in his footsteps. David often recalled how Douglas supported and encouraged him during his first match, a memory he cherished deeply. Around this time, however, the family faced a tragic loss when John passed away. This hardship led Suzanne to return to her native Texas with her children, seeking support from family as they coped with their grief. After graduating from high school, Douglas pursued a biology degree at a local university. Those close to him remember this period fondly, as he not only excelled academically, but also co-founded a fraternity, demonstrating leadership and teamwork. During his college years, Douglas also discovered a passion for art, an interest that led him to create murals and design logos, distinguishing himself in various academic projects. Despite these new interests, he remained dedicated to wrestling, eventually ranking among the top 10 wrestlers in the state. After completing his degree, Douglas enlisted in the Navy, initially serving as a navigator and co-pilot on aircraft carriers. He continued his training at flight school, where he earned the rank of Naval Flight Officer. In the early 1990s, Douglas met someone special, leading to a whirlwind romance and marriage. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in divorce as quickly as it began. Douglas refocused on his career, enrolling in intelligence training and joining the Naval Intelligence Division. After achieving the rank of lieutenant commander, he retired from the Navy, ending a distinguished military career. Seeking a new direction, he moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where he opened a restaurant. His military background also allowed him to work as a consultant for security and communications technology firms, securing government contracts. During this time, he met a single mother of 2, and the two married in 1999, creating a blended family. However, despite appearances, their relationship was sometimes tumultuous, with reports of conflict, including physical altercations that they chose not to report. Nevertheless, life went on, and in 2001, they welcomed a daughter, Eva. Shortly after Eva's birth, Douglas underwent a vasectomy. The following years appeared stable as Douglas managed several tech businesses, working with both private clients and government projects. Eventually, he became involved in national security initiatives, focusing on strategic policy development. As Douglas' professional obligations increased, he was frequently away from home, which strained his relationship with his wife, to the point where they began sleeping in separate rooms. In December 2015, Eva returned home from school one day to find the front door locked and no response from her mother. Worried, she crawled through the bushes to a window. With the help of a neighbor who forced the door open, they discovered her mother's lifeless body. The emergency services were called, and her remains were taken to the morgue, where an autopsy later revealed that the woman had passed away from an undiagnosed heart condition. This unexpected loss deeply affected the family, and Douglas found solace in faith. He began attending church regularly and started each day by reading Bible verses, sharing them with his daughter. By 2016, he had established connections in political circles, particularly with prominent donors of the Republican presidential campaign. During a summer fundraiser in Florida, he met Ashley Burns, a striking young woman born in Texas in 1991 to Alicia and Raymond Burns. Ashley had been immersed in ballet from a young age, working with renowned instructors and joining prestigious ballet companies. However, at 23, a leg injury forced her to retire from professional ballet, setting her on a new path. Ashley subsequently began teaching dance classes to children and maintained costumes for student workshops. She also explored modeling, primarily in swimwear and lingerie photography, though her success was limited. On a personal note, Ashley had been through a divorce after a 2-year marriage and remained close to her mother. She was a dedicated Republican, and after attending a political event, met then-presidential candidate Donald Trump. This encounter led her to join his campaign office in Florida, where she met Douglas at a fundraising dinner. Her beauty, paired with her elegance as a former ballerina, immediately caught his attention. Despite their significant age difference, Douglas was 54 and she was 24. They connected effortlessly that evening. Later, Douglas texted her, expressing gratitude for the time they shared. 2 days later, when Douglas flew to Israel for business, he and Ashley maintained a steady flow of text messages, resembling two teenagers in love. As they got to know each other better through these exchanges, they discovered shared interests, from a deep religious faith to similar music tastes. Both also shared a notable enthusiasm for collecting firearms. Upon Douglas' return to the U.S., they had already decided to marry, opting to keep their plans private, even from Douglas' daughter, Eva. On September 6, 2016, they married in a small private ceremony in Charleston, with only a close friend of Douglas as a witness. Ashley then moved into Douglas' home. Their early days of marriage faced an unexpected complication when Eva's friend, Sydney, moved in due to issues at home. Douglas and Ashley handled this situation with composure, eventually becoming Sydney's legal guardians. Despite her efforts, Ashley struggled to connect with Eva, who was still grieving her mother's death. It didn't help that Eva had been unaware of her father's plans to remarry. Ashley made numerous attempts to bond by sharing activities, like watching ballet videos and working on gardening projects, but she couldn't shake her insecurity and jealousy, sensing that Douglas would always prioritize his daughter over her. In early 2017, the couple decided to pursue a shared dream by launching a ballet company in Charleston. They sought to challenge traditional ballet norms by recruiting dancers from diverse backgrounds, creating an inclusive space for talent. At the same time, Ashley persuaded Douglas to undergo a vasectomy reversal so they could have a child together. This succeeded, and in July of that year, they learned they were expecting. However, the news intensified tensions between Ashley and Eva, especially when Ashley found Eva's diary, revealing the girl's deep resentment toward her. The diary discovery ignited a series of arguments between Douglas and Ashley that grew increasingly frequent and intense. During one confrontation, Douglas punched a wall, later even lashing out at the family pets. In another heated moment, he threw a gun toward Ashley, leaving a hole in the wall. He then raised the weapon to his own head, threatening to end his life, only to discharge it toward the ceiling moments later. Astonishingly, a few days after this explosive incident, they held a party at a hotel to formally announce their marriage to friends. In August, Ashley experienced significant discomfort related to her pregnancy. After discussing it with Douglas, they agreed she would rest at her mother's house in Florida, while he stayed back to organize ballet company logistics. On September 18th, the long-awaited launch of their ballet company, Douglas was busy at the studio supervising the dancers' arrival. Meanwhile, Ashley made the 600-mile journey to Florida. She quietly packed her belongings, left a letter on the table, and departed without a word. In the note, she described Douglas as possessive and controlling. Alluding to the gun incident, she expressed fear for her own life and that of their unborn child. She warned him not to contact her, threatening to involve the police if he tried. After reading her letter, Douglas was filled with regret and began texting Ashley, promising to change. For weeks, he sent apologies, declarations of love, and assurances of a different future. Ashley's responses, however, remained practical, focusing only on company contracts and financial matters. Despite his continued promises, Ashley wasn't open to reconciliation. She eventually contacted the police, informing them of Douglas' anger issues and recounting the incident with the firearm. As a result of the ongoing conflict, Child Protective Services visited Douglas' home and conducted an interview with his daughter, Eva. Following this, Douglas was required to undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation. However, the results showed no signs of mental health issues, nor was he considered a threat. Ultimately, he was cleared of the accusations. By this point, though, Douglas was grappling with financial issues, as his efforts to save the ballet company were in vain. The initial investment they believed was secure didn't exist. Despite his optimism, he hoped to secure enough funding to avoid exposing the truth. Under mounting pressure, he borrowed tens of thousands of dollars to cover the first payroll. Nonetheless, by late October, half of the dancers were dismissed, and Ashley publicly distanced herself from the organization on social media. Douglas asked her to take down the post to avoid affecting the remaining dancers, but she refused. Shortly afterward, he admitted the financial reality and had no choice but to close the company. Meanwhile, in Florida, Ashley's health was worsening, plagued by intense pain and fatigue. After numerous unsuccessful medical attempts to diagnose her condition, she sent a hair sample to a lab, which revealed dangerously high toxin levels, suggesting potential intentional exposure. She then recalled the tea Douglas prepared for her each morning and began suspecting that he might have been poisoning her, perhaps even contributing to his previous wife's sudden death. Soon after, Douglas, unaware of her suspicions, sent her a package of tea bags. Ashley, however, avoided drinking it, opting to take it to the police for analysis by a specialized team. Tests later showed no traces of toxic substances. 3 weeks before her due date, Ashley checked into a hospital without informing Douglas. From the beginning, she told medical staff that she believed her husband had poisoned her, exposing her unborn baby to heavy metals. She also accused him of domestic violence, claiming he had held her captive and harassed her in Florida. While her claims couldn't be substantiated, the hospital took precautions for her safety and assigned her a new name. After a cesarean section, her daughter was born healthy. Nevertheless, Ashley immediately sought hyperbaric oxygen treatments for the baby, enrolling her newborn in 26 sessions. In late July 2018, Ashley and Douglas came face-to-face for the first time in months at a courthouse in Florida. Douglas sought custody of his daughter, whom he hadn't yet met. Meanwhile, Ashley, alleging domestic violence and attempted poisoning, requested a restraining order against him. After a 2-day hearing, the judge denied Ashley's request and decided on shared custody of their daughter, citing insufficient evidence of poisoning or related illness. Following the court's decision, they were required to attend counseling sessions together for the sake of their child. During Easter weekend in 2019, while having dinner as a family, Ashley and her mother privately questioned Eva. Ashley's suspicions of Douglas hadn't faded, and she wondered aloud if he might have been involved in the death of his second wife. Eva tried to reassure them, insisting her father was a good man. The following year, Douglas noticed Ashley wearing what appeared to be an engagement ring. He secretly installed a tracking device in her car and hired a private investigator, confirming that she was seeing someone new. Ashley, on the other hand, filed a police report accusing Douglas of allegedly abusing their young daughter, prompting him to file for divorce. After an investigation, authorities found no evidence supporting the allegations. Frustrated, Douglas emailed the police, claiming Ashley had a split personality. By then, their relationship seemed irreparable. Yet in mid-2020, despite divorce proceedings, Ashley surprised Douglas by reaching out, hinting at reconciliation. They began seeing each other again, and hopeful that things might work out, made plans to move in together. Douglas rented an apartment close to Ashley's mother's home, packed up his belongings, and arranged for a moving truck. On September 27, 2020, when Douglas arrived in Florida, Ashley's mother took their daughter for a walk while the couple settled into their new home. Suddenly, a heated argument erupted, loud enough for a neighbor to hear. Concerned, the neighbor immediately called 911. Moments later, Ashley, carrying a firearm, ran to a neighboring house, knocking on the door and asking for help. The armed neighbor also contacted emergency services. When paramedics arrived, followed closely by police officers, the entire team secured the area. The paramedics noted that Douglas was still breathing, though he had multiple injuries, including wounds to his leg and arm. A bullet had also penetrated his chest cavity, complicating his condition. Despite all efforts to save him, Douglas was pronounced dead at a local hospital an hour later. That night, Ashley claimed she acted in self-defense, offering few details to detectives. Meanwhile, her mother asserted that she and Ashley had endured domestic abuse from Douglas for over 3 years, adding that they had attempted to seek help on multiple occasions but received no support. Ashley's lawyer told a detective that her client had been planning an escape to get away from Douglas once and for all. According to her, Ashley had arranged for a psychologist, 2 attorneys, a disposable phone, a safe location, and a rental car. She intended to execute the plan the next day, fearing Douglas might discover her intentions. Though Ashley wasn't initially arrested, investigators began to uncover inconsistencies in her self-defense claim. For instance, there were no weapons or blunt objects near Douglas, and Ashley showed no visible injuries or bruises. In November 2020, Ashley was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. After pleading not guilty and posting bail, she was released a week later. She was allowed visitation with her daughter, but primary custody was granted to her mother. Despite her legal troubles, Ashley continued to give interviews, defending her version of events. As the case garnered national attention, Ashley became widely compared to the protagonist of the 2010 film Black Swan, a psychological thriller set in the ballet world. After many legal twists and delays, Ashley's trial took place in the summer of 2024. According to the prosecution, Ashley had always intended to be a single mother and never planned to grant Douglas visitation rights. For them, her abuse claims were merely part of a strategy to achieve this goal. Ashley and her defense maintained their original story, and during her turn on the stand, she captivated the court and the nation following the trial by recounting, with deep emotion, her account of what happened on that tragic day. Her defense argued that authorities had failed to respond appropriately to her numerous complaints against Douglas, and that she suffered from battered woman syndrome. Among Ashley's supporters in the courtroom were her mother and her 6-year-old daughter, who even spoke to a journalist, stating she was doing what was right for her mother. Despite this, after a late-night deliberation, the jury found Ashley Benefield guilty, not of the murder charge she faced, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter in the death of her husband, Douglas Benefield. The minimum penalty for this charge was 11 years in prison, with a maximum of 30 years. Afterward, Eva praised the verdict in a video posted on social media. Ashley's defense team, however, quickly expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict, announcing their intention to file for a mistrial, citing alleged juror misconduct. Although Ashley's sentencing was initially set for October 22, 2024, the judge announced that he would consider the defense's motion, claiming juror bias, possibly due to alleged dishonesty in a juror's responses and the potential use of a cell phone during deliberations. As of the final week of October 2024, our investigation found that the court was still deliberating on the defense's motion. Ashley's fate remained uncertain, as she could face up to 30 years in prison if the judge denies the motion and issues a sentence. On the night of September 29, 2015, a shocking 911 call broke the silence in a small town in upstate New York. Thomas Clayton, a former hockey player, came home from a poker game to find his wife, Kelly, lying on the kitchen floor, lifeless. The scene was disturbing. There was no sign of forced entry, but Kelly had clearly been attacked. But bloodstains on the walls showed signs of a terrible struggle. As detectives started looking into what happened, they uncovered secrets that hinted at something much darker. What really took place that night, and who was responsible for Kelly's tragic death? The truth would soon reveal a shocking twist no one expected. Kelly Elizabeth Stage was born on August 1, 1980, in Elmira, New York. She was the youngest of 3 children of Elizabeth and Howard Stage, both of whom were beloved in the community, especially Howard, who had served as the longtime chief of the local volunteer fire department. Growing up, Kelly was surrounded by her loving family, which included her brother Lenny and her older sister Kim, who, being 10 years her senior, took on a protective role in Kelly's life. The Stage household was filled with warmth and affection, allowing each family member to thrive in their own way. Kelly attended a liberal arts-focused school where she excelled, not only making the honor roll, but also standing out as a cheerleader and softball player. Those who knew her described her as someone who easily saw the good in people and situations, always radiating positivity and a zest for life. Her optimistic and outgoing nature made her naturally attract others. In 1998, Kelly graduated with a degree in education from the State University of New York, and though many assumed she would begin teaching immediately, she surprised everyone by taking a different path. She packed her bags and moved to Las Vegas, where she started working as a cocktail waitress. However, the pull of home was strong, and by 2000, she returned to Elmira to spend Christmas with her family. During this trip, she met Thomas Clayton, a man she would soon fall in love with. Thomas, a native of Binghamton, had graduated in 1998 and joined Elmira's minor league professional hockey team, where he played forward for 4 seasons. He quickly became a local star, enjoying the attention and admiration that came with his status. Some claimed that fame gave him a sense of entitlement, and he was known to engage in multiple romantic affairs simultaneously. His reckless behavior even led to an arrest after dancing naked on a bar table. Despite his wild side, Thomas and Kelly's paths crossed at a hockey game, and they were instantly drawn to each other. That same night, they ran into each other at a local bar, and their relationship blossomed from there. The couple was inseparable, and within a year, they married, with Kelly taking her husband's surname and becoming known as Kelly Clayton. Around this time, Thomas's hockey career came to an abrupt end due to an injury. After retiring from the sport, the couple settled in the small town of Clayton, New York, where Thomas became the owner of a franchise that specialized in water and fire damage restoration. In 2008, their first child, a daughter named Charlie, was born, and Kelly embraced motherhood with an overwhelming sense of love and devotion. A few years later, the birth of their son, Cullen, brought even more joy into Kelly's life, as she devoted herself entirely to her family. To those on the outside, the Claytons seemed like the perfect, happy family. Thomas focused on running his business, while Kelly balanced waitressing at a local restaurant and caring for their 2 children. Everything seemed idyllic until tragedy struck in 2015. On the night of September 29, 2015, Kelly was at home with her children, while Thomas was out playing poker at a friend's house. Just after midnight, Thomas made a frantic call to 911. reporting that he had found his wife lying unresponsive on the floor. When the local sheriff's office and New York State Police arrived at the scene, a paramedic confirmed Kelly had died. Initial forensic evidence revealed she had been brutally beaten to death. Investigators found no signs of forced entry, leading them to believe that Kelly's killer may have been someone she knew. A trail of blood led from the upstairs to the kitchen, where Kelly's body was discovered, indicating that she had tried to flee during the attack. A hole in the wall at the bottom of the staircase was evidence of the sheer violence of the assault, and blood spatter on the walls and floors pointed to her having been struck repeatedly with a blunt object. While questioning Thomas and neighbors in the hours following the murder, a critical piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: Kelly's daughter, Charlie. The 7-year-old told the county sheriff that she had seen a man hurting her mother. During her conversation with the officer, Charlie revealed a chilling detail. She described how her mother had run down the hallway, yelling for her to escape. But the most haunting part of her account came when she mentioned that, although the attacker had been wearing a hood, his eyes looked just like her father's. At that moment, authorities called in a child forensic investigator to assist with talking to Charlie about the traumatic event. A second interview with her took place at the county's Child Advocacy Center, where every question revolved around Thomas. According to Charlie, the mask worn by the assailant resembled one her father used when he went hunting. When asked to describe the man's size, Kelly's daughter, Charlie, said he was as tall as her father. She also pointed out a similarity in the jeans the man was wearing. Although suspicion toward Thomas grew due to the child's statements, he was at a friend's house that night, about 20 miles from his home, a drive of roughly 30 minutes. Furthermore, when he discovered Kelly's body and rushed to a neighbor's house to call 911, there was no blood on his hands or clothes, and he hadn't had enough time to clean himself up. The police were left with several unanswered questions. Thomas's alibi was corroborated by others who were with him that night. However, investigators learned that Thomas had borrowed a woman's cell phone to make a call only 90 minutes before returning home and finding Kelly's body. This raised more doubts. As the hours passed, the preliminary autopsy report on Kelly's body was released. It revealed that she had died from severe head trauma and damage to the lower part of her brain. In addition, her body was covered in bruises. She had abrasions, fractures to her face, and a serious contusion on her right hip. According to the forensic expert, the blows were so brutal that Kelly's body was almost unrecognizable, making it difficult to estimate her age and appearance. She also had defensive wounds on her arms and hands, including broken fingers, which indicated she had fought for her life. With the growing suspicion surrounding Thomas, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and noticed a high volume of messages and calls that pointed to a mysterious connection with a man named Michael Beard. In fact, Beard was the person Thomas had called the night of the murder. Michael Beard was a worker living in Elmira, in an apartment owned by the Clayton family. He had previously worked for Thomas's business and was often invited to do jobs around the family property. At the time of the crime, however, Beard had recently been fired from a similar company that also specialized in home restoration after fires and floods. State police investigators questioned Michael Beard multiple times over the next few days. Initially, he denied any involvement, but on October 2, 2015, after getting caught in several contradictions, he eventually broke down and confessed. In an unrecorded interview, Beard admitted that he had killed Kelly. He revealed chilling details, stating that Thomas had paid him $10,000 to carry out the murder. Beard then led the investigators to the place where he had hidden the murder weapon, a hammer handle stained with blood, which was found not far from the Clayton home. Beard also handed over the blood-stained clothes he wore that night and directed the authorities to a creek where he had tossed the keys to the family's home, given to him by Thomas. Forensic analysis of the blunt object used in the attack confirmed that the DNA matched Kelly's blood. Investigators determined that Beard had worn gloves during the murder, and though he had tried to dispose of them to eliminate DNA evidence, he failed to do so because the gloves belonged to Thomas. As more evidence pointed to Thomas, other discoveries raised further suspicions about him. Notably, a year before the incident, Thomas had doubled Kelly's life insurance policy from $500,000 to $1 million. During a media interview, Kelly's sister didn't hesitate to assert that Thomas stood to benefit from her death. The case became clear and justice began to move forward. With Charlie's testimony, the evidence collected, and Michael Beard's confession, prosecutors concluded that Kelly's death was a murder for hire. Both men were charged with first and second-degree murder, and it was announced that their trials would be held separately. However, a third arrest shocked everyone. Mark Blanford, another suspect, was charged with second-degree murder, robbery, and conspiracy. According to the investigation, Michael Beard had been recruited to act as a lookout and help commit a robbery at the Clayton home. He claimed he never had direct contact with Thomas, and wasn't aware of any conspiracy to commit murder. His understanding was that he would be participating in a burglary. As the days passed, tensions rose during Thomas Clayton's arraignment, revealing a clear divide between the two families who had once been on good terms. Thomas's supporters sat on one side of the courtroom, while Kelly's relatives and friends occupied the other. At the hearing, Thomas pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued that Thomas had no involvement in the crime, pointing out that his alibi was solid. GPS data from his car confirmed that he was miles away, playing poker when Kelly was killed. The defense also noted that Thomas had passed a polygraph test. However, the prosecution countered by stating that the GPS evidence was irrelevant since the charges were based on a murder-for-hire plot. They also opposed the use of the polygraph test in the trial, arguing that it should not be admitted as evidence. Kelly's murder garnered significant media attention, stirring feelings of outrage and sadness within the community. Purple ribbons lined the streets, and posters demanding justice for Kelly were displayed throughout the town. For Kelly's family, the tragedy was immeasurable. Her two young children were now left without a mother, and their father was in prison. The emotional toll was immense, but so was the financial strain, as Kelly's sister, who was granted custody of the kids, suddenly faced the challenge of raising and supporting two young children. Friends and relatives rallied for support to help the children through this difficult time. In February 2016, Thomas was released from prison after posting an $850,000 bail. While awaiting trial, the judge lifted the protective order that had barred him from his home, allowing him access since the crime scene had been cleared, and the children no longer lived there. Michael Beard was the first to go to trial, but in the days leading up to it, he shockingly recanted his confession, which had not been recorded. He claimed that Thomas had hired him to burn down the house, which was supposed to be empty, to collect insurance money. According to Beard, when he arrived, he found Kelly's body and heard the children upstairs, at which point he abandoned his mission and left. Michael's defense attorney argued that his client had been coerced by the police into signing a false confession, and that they would present evidence in court to prove this. On October 25th, Beard pleaded not guilty before a jury of 8 men and 4 women. He even referred to Kelly as a friend, expressing sympathy for her family. The prosecution, however, remained confident that the testimony and evidence would show that Michael and Thomas had conspired together. Despite Beard's change of story, the prosecution presented the details of his signed confession, which was read aloud during the testimony of the New York State Police investigator who had been present when Beard initially explained the events. In the confession, Beard said that Thomas had asked him to do something that could land him in prison, and though he didn't initially specify what, the tone of Thomas's request had shocked the investigator. Beard had first refused, but ultimately agreed after Thomas threatened him. Desperate for money due to unemployment, Beard accepted the offer of $10,000, with Thomas promising to provide a vehicle, a weapon, and the keys to the house. The plan was to enter the house when the children were not home, kill Kelly, and then set the house on fire to cover up the crime, making it look like a candle had caused the blaze. On the night of September 28th, Beard entered the home, went upstairs and found Kelly lying in bed. He struck her with a blunt object, and though Kelly fought back, stumbling through the upper floor of the house, she eventually fell down the stairs. Despite being injured, she made it to the kitchen, where Beard attacked her again, delivering the fatal blows to her head. According to another investigator, Thomas had been supposed to call Beard that night as a signal, but Beard was instructed not to answer the phone. Phone records revealed that Beard's phone was turned on and off 7 times that night, the last time being at 11:45 p.m. It remained off until 1:12 a.m. on September 29. The trial included extensive forensic evidence, such as Michael's DNA found on the blunt object used to kill Kelly. Michael's attorney argued that his client's confession was coerced, claiming he had feared his wife would be implicated if he didn't take responsibility. The defense also pointed to the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints, and questioned the reliability of witnesses, suggesting they had been influenced or had misunderstood what had happened on the night of the crime. After a 2-week trial, Michael Beard was found guilty of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The reaction from Kelly's family and friends was one of immense relief and satisfaction. Kelly's sister publicly called Michael a coward who deserved the harshest sentence. Bringing Thomas, Kelly's husband, to justice proved more challenging. His trial began in January 2017. The case against him was complicated because all physical evidence pointed to Michael, and the district attorney couldn't use Michael's confession or call him as a witness due to Beard's retraction of his earlier statement. Instead, the prosecution relied on phone records and GPS data to build their case against Thomas, alongside a mountain of circumstantial evidence and testimony from women who claimed to have had affairs with him while he was married to Kelly. The testimonies of these women provided another potential motive for the crime. Prosecutors argued that Thomas, a businessman and former hockey player, no longer loved his wife, which was evidenced by his numerous affairs. 3 women testified that Thomas often complained about Kelly, using derogatory terms to describe her, and told them he planned to leave her because she was lazy and ungrateful. However, he also admitted to one of his lovers that he couldn't divorce Kelly because she would take everything. One of the most shocking testimonies came from a minor who was 15 years old when she had been involved with Thomas. Another key witness was a former police officer who owned a private investigation firm. He was able to cross-reference phone records and determine that Thomas and Michael had been together at various points leading up to the crime. It was also shown that Michael left his home shortly before 11 p.m. on the night of the murder right after receiving a call from the man who had hired him. The prosecutor concluded that Thomas had masterminded the plan to end his marriage and had found the perfect scapegoat in his former employee, Michael. Thomas's defense centered on the argument that he was being falsely accused, claiming that Michael had acted alone with the sole intent of robbing the house. The prosecution called 65 witnesses and presented over 400 pieces of evidence, while the defense presented 10 witnesses and conducted rigorous cross-examinations. 7 weeks after the trial began, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before delivering their verdict. On February 23, 2017, Thomas was found guilty of first and second-degree murder. After the verdict was read, Kelly's sister presented a letter that Charlie, Kelly's daughter, had written for the court. In it, Charlie expressed her love for both her mother and father, but called her dad a coward for making Michael kill her mom. Kelly's sister also stated that raising the children allowed her to keep her sister's memory alive and ensure that Kelly's legacy as a loving mother would never be forgotten. Thomas's family stood by him throughout the trial, and after the guilty verdict, his father expressed pride in calling him his son. The sentencing hearing took place nearly 2 months later. Thomas Clayton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was ordered to serve his time in a New York State correctional facility. As for the third man charged in connection with the crime, it was revealed that he had reached a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Thomas and received a sentence of 3 to 6 years in prison. In October 2018, Thomas appealed his conviction, bringing the case back into the public eye. His lawyers argued that the evidence presented at the trial, particularly the cell phone data used to track movements, was unreliable and untested. They also maintained that the prosecution had failed to prove Thomas's guilt. Despite their efforts, the appeal was denied, leaving limited options for future legal challenges. On January 20, 2023, more than 6 years after the crime, a major television network aired a true crime documentary, which reignited public interest in the case. Michael Beard participated in the program, supposedly to clarify his side of the story. In the interview, He continued to claim his innocence, asserting that both Thomas and the police had set him up and that he had nothing to do with Kelly's murder. Beard stated that when he found Kelly's body, he didn't check if she was alive or call 911 because he wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. He explained that, as a black man, the mere thought of being found in the home of a dead white woman in the middle of the night terrified him. Beard also claimed that he had encountered someone else inside the house, but was unable to see their face as the person knocked him down while fleeing. Thomas refused to be interviewed for the program, while Kelly's family shared that her children were doing well, growing up happy despite everything they had been through. On the evening of November 2, 2001, Irene Jones and her daughter Isabella went out to celebrate Irene's 56th birthday. They shared what seemed like a lovely meal together before heading home, but by the end of the night, only one of them would survive. After a quick stop for gas, Isabella walked into the house alone. She says she had no idea what was waiting inside. What unfolded would set off years of suspicion, uncover strange secrets, and leave friends and family questioning everything. Megan Jones, later known as Isabella Carolina Camelo Gomez, was born in 1974 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Public information about her early years and personal life is extremely limited, though it is known she was the only child of Irene Jones, a single mother who raised her. No details about her father's identity have surfaced, nor are there records of her schooling or employment history. Isabella lived with Irene into adulthood in a charming suburban home Irene had bought in Sydney. Irene Caroline Jones, born on November 2, 1945, was widely known as a devoted, generous woman and a caring mother. After retiring, she dedicated much of her time to volunteering for various charities. Friends and neighbors described her as sweet and hospitable, often offering her home to those in need. Irene was known to provide not only a loving home, but also financial support to Isabella. Even during brief periods when they lived apart, Irene always welcomed Isabella back. To the outside world, their relationship appeared close-knit and supportive. However, later accounts would reveal a different dynamic. Despite her public shyness and insecurity, Isabella was reportedly disrespectful and sometimes abusive toward her mother behind closed doors. Matters worsened in 1999 when Isabella met a woman named Paula Camelo at their local Mormon church. Over time, Isabella and Paula became close friends, and Paula eventually introduced her husband, Carlos Camelo Gomez, a Colombian native. This introduction would mark the beginning of a chain of events that deeply affected everyone involved. The couple started spending more time with Isabella, and Carlos eventually mentioned his brother Cesar, who was stuck in Colombia due to visa issues. In March 2001, Isabella traveled to Colombia to meet Cesar. Soon after, she claimed they had fallen in love and married him, news that shocked Irene. Despite her objections, Irene learned of the marriage through photos, to which Isabella reassured her it was merely a fake marriage. Following this, Isabella adopted the name Isabella Carolina Camelo Gomez and grew increasingly close to Carlos. Their bond raised suspicions, particularly since Cesar was still unable to join her in Australia. Paula, growing jealous, suspected an affair between Isabella and her husband. It later emerged that Isabella was financially supporting Carlos, sending money to his family in Colombia. Carlos even had a separate room in Irene's house and a private phone to communicate with Isabella in secret. She reportedly bought him a car, yet he continued to pressure her for more, hinting he would leave Paula for her. Tensions between Irene and Isabella escalated as Irene opposed Isabella's financial support of Carlos. This led to intense conflicts, with Isabella allegedly becoming physically aggressive. A friend of Irene later recounted instances where Isabella's anger turned violent, breaking her mother's glasses and, on one occasion, reportedly pinning her down by the neck. Irene confided in this friend, admitting she was frightened but hesitant to involve the police, fearing potential fallout. She also felt threatened by Paula, who reportedly arrived at the house on multiple occasions, threatening to burn it down. In response, Irene installed security lights, though it offered little comfort. Witnesses described Carlos as aggressive and domineering toward Irene, physically intimidating her and further isolating her within her own home. Irene saw him as a manipulative presence who was not only depleting her finances but also eroding her sense of safety and control. Carlos's control reached unimaginable levels when he demanded that Irene mortgage her home, transfer its ownership to Isabella, or sell it to provide him with $20,000 to start a construction business. By May 2001, tensions had reached a breaking point. Carlos and Paula had separated and, shortly afterward, Carlos moved permanently into Irene's home. Irene felt pressured to vacate her main bedroom so he could share it with her daughter. Then, in October 2001, Carlos claimed he was returning to Colombia, but Irene later found out he was still around and confided in a friend about her concerns. She grew more anxious after learning that her mail was being redirected to an address in Maryland, where Carlos and Isabella had briefly stayed earlier that year. Irene was perplexed by the situation, especially as Isabella, despite receiving money to pay household bills, had not done so, using the funds to pay off her own debts instead. With mounting debts from the car she had bought for Carlos, Isabella even owed Irene a significant amount. As the financial strain intensified, Isabella renewed her push for Irene to sell the house. However, Irene refused, threatening to change her will, which had initially left her assets to Isabella in the event of her passing. Despite the friction, things appeared to settle somewhat between mother and daughter, and no one found it odd when they went out together on November 2, 2001, to celebrate Irene's 56th birthday. Although Irene was still apprehensive, she decided to make the most of this momentary peace, hoping to enjoy a calm evening with her daughter after nearly 2 years of constant tension. Their meal at the restaurant seemed pleasant, and after paying the bill around 7 p.m., the two women left to drive home. Isabella took the wheel, but upon arrival she told Irene that the fuel tank was nearly empty, and suggested that Irene go inside while she quickly stopped by the gas station. Irene entered the house alone while Isabella drove to refuel, returning around 8:15 p.m., citing abdominal cramps from her period and wanting a hot shower. After parking the car, Isabella went straight to the bathroom. Following nearly half an hour in the shower, she emerged, wrapped her hair in a towel, applied face cream, and prepared for bed. However, when Isabella opened the bathroom door, she was met with a terrifying sight. Standing in front of her was an intruder, a blond man in a beige long-sleeved shirt, his face covered with a pantyhose mask and wearing white gloves. According to Isabella, terror-stricken, she tried to flee through the bathroom's outdoor exit. However, the intruder reportedly yanked her back violently with a cord or cable around her neck. Isabella claimed she struggled fiercely, but the man struck her and pushed her onto the bed, attempting to undress her. She screamed for help, causing the man to flee. Shaken and terrified, she bolted to the nearest neighbor's house, frantically knocking and crying out for help, saying someone had broken into her home. The neighbors let her in, and Isabella urgently expressed concern for her mother. They advised her against going back, fearing it was unsafe. Isabella then borrowed the neighbor's phone and dialed Australia's emergency number, 000, anxiously informing the operator that an intruder had attacked her and that her mother was still inside. Police and ambulance units arrived shortly after. While paramedics attended to Isabella, officers searched the home, where they made a horrifying discovery. Irene's lifeless body was found face down on the floor, showing signs of strangulation and cuts on her neck. Officers immediately cordoned off the crime scene, calling in homicide detectives and forensic experts. The home appeared disturbed with items scattered, initially suggesting a burglary gone wrong. However, valuable items were left untouched, and there were no signs of forced entry or missing belongings. Isabella was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for her injuries and to recover from the traumatic incident. During the ambulance ride, a friend of Irene's accompanied her. Isabella repeatedly asked about her mother, insistent on seeing her. Irene's body was transported to the morgue, where a post-mortem examination revealed that she had died from a combination of asphyxiation and sharp force injuries. It was determined that she had been rendered unconscious by strangulation before being attacked with a sharp object on the left side of her neck. The cuts were not immediately fatal, leading the assailant to use 2 ligatures around her neck, leaving a distinctive double mark on her skin. In total, she sustained 22 injuries, with the time of death estimated around 9:30 p.m., with a possible margin of error of 3 hours. The ligatures and sharp object used in the assault were never found. After leaving the hospital, Isabella stayed with one of Irene's cousins and her husband. The couple, deeply fond of Irene, described her as a kind soul, incapable of harming anyone, and were devastated by the brutal nature of her death. The investigation into Irene's death continued, but interviews with neighbors, friends, and family yielded no leads to help authorities identify or arrest the suspect. Frustrated, investigators sought to re-interview Isabella, but Irene's cousin and her husband reported that Isabella was constantly distressed and often cried when remembering her mother. Some sources even claim they had to call an ambulance after Isabella overdosed on sleeping pills prescribed to help her rest. When the police finally spoke with her, they asked if Irene had any enemies, or if anyone might wish to harm her. Isabella mentioned only a minor traffic incident she was involved in, but the other driver was quickly ruled out. By this point, investigators began doubting Isabella's account. Although both Isabella and Carlos were seen as suspects, there was no concrete evidence tying them to Irene's murder. At Irene's funeral on November 9th, some attendees allegedly heard Isabella mutter incriminating words, though this information would surface only years later, as witnesses initially believed she was rambling in grief. After the murder, Carlos and 2 of his friends were questioned. One of them, named Sean, stated he was at home, arriving around 5 p.m. and then falling asleep until 8:30 p.m. when Carlos and another friend, Nicholas, joined him. He explained that Carlos sometimes stayed over, sleeping on his couch. Around 1 a.m., Sean woke briefly to find his friends on the sofa. By 3 a.m., the police arrived to interview him, to which he claimed no knowledge of Carlos' connections with Irene or Isabella. Carlos and Nicholas provided statements placing themselves together in various locations until midnight, giving Carlos an alibi near the time of Irene's death. Carlos admitted meeting Irene and Isabella through his ex-wife Paula, claiming they had helped him post-separation. He noted that he once held a key to the Jones house, but had since lost it. The investigation seemed to stall until, a year after Irene's death, her daughter sold the house for $300,000. In November 2002, Isabella gave birth to her first child with Carlos. Initially, she denied he was the father, stating he was only a friend and brother-in-law. Later, she admitted the child resulted from a casual encounter, after which she realized her true feelings for Carlos, deciding to divorce Caesar to be with him. Disturbing details about Isabella's relationship with the Camello family heightened police suspicions. However, without solid evidence, Isabella remained uncharged, and Caesar was never questioned despite his occasional stays in Australia. Over time, the case languished without arrests or a clear answer regarding who was responsible for Irene's death. In January 2003, the case took a new turn when Isabella reported Carlos for assault. Police records reveal that she stated they had known each other for about 4 years and had been in an on-and-off relationship for the last 3 years. Passed with no progress until November 2007, when a forensic inquest took place to re-examine evidence with the potential to refer the case to prosecutors if warranted. Though Isabella attended, she offered no new information. However, one witness, Diane McLeod, who had accompanied Isabella in the ambulance, shared new details. Diane recalled that Isabella had initially told detectives she did not see her mother during the attack, but had mentioned seeing Irene in the house to her during the ambulance ride. Diane also reported that Irene had confided in her about her fears regarding Isabella's connection to the Camello family, particularly Paula's threats. Carlos, in a follow-up interview, stated that he met Isabella at a cybercafe around 7:30 p.m. on November 2nd before heading to Sean's house between 8 and 8:30 p.m. He then claimed he returned to the cybercafe before heading back to Sean's and then to a club with Nicola where they stayed until midnight. He denied being near the Jones house that evening, though his statements contained minor inconsistencies. Ultimately, the investigation concluded with insufficient evidence to proceed to trial, leaving the true identity of Irene's killer undetermined. The lead investigator recommended offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and suggested the case be transferred to the Homicide and Cold Case Unit for further examination. Between March and September 2013, the deputy state coroner reviewed the case again, yet it remained amid 700 other unsolved cases, limiting resources and attention. No further developments occurred until March 2017, when the Ministry of Police approved the suggested reward. New witnesses came forward, and a forensics team re-examined evidence collected from the initial investigation. Among the items was a yellow blouse Isabella wore the night of the crime, preserved in a forensic lab since 2001. This item had not previously undergone forensic analysis, as the technology available today didn't exist at the time. According to records, the blouse was retrieved from storage by state forensic staff in March 2013, photographed, and then returned to the lab for analysis in April that year, remaining under police custody thereafter. The forensic analysis from July 2017 provided significant insights when microscopic tests and DNA sampling were conducted on the blouse Isabella wore on the night of Irene's death. The tests revealed small brown stains consistent with traces of bodily fluids on the front and back of the blouse, along with several strands of hair. The forensic report concluded that the blouse had been exposed to an area with blood splatter, indicating direct exposure rather than mere contact with the perpetrator or the victim's body. Experts suggested the splatter likely came directly from the victim, Irene. Further tests showed that traces of bodily fluids on the blouse matched Irene's DNA, while seminal fluid found on it matched the genetic profile of Carlos. Unfortunately, by this time, Carlos was unavailable for questioning due to a severe brain injury from a 2013 motorcycle accident, which left him with deep retrograde amnesia, erasing memories of events before the accident. Though investigators hit a dead end with Carlos, the forensic findings and additional witness statements provided grounds to implicate Isabella in a conspiracy to orchestrate her mother's death. Supporting evidence included statements from witnesses at Irene's funeral, where some recalled hearing Isabella whisper that she didn't mean for things to go so far. This admission prompted authorities to wiretap Isabella and Carlos' phone conversations and set up listening devices. Surveillance tapes captured sounds of intimate interactions between Carlos and Isabella at the residence, confirming a long-standing relationship. Combined with Isabella's 2003 assault report, in which she admitted to a 3-year relationship with Carlos, it became clear that her marriage to Caesar was merely a facade, supposedly arranged by Carlos to facilitate Caesar's immigration to Australia in exchange for affection and sexual encounters. Further corroborating evidence came from Irene's experiences living in fear with Isabella and Carlos, with Isabella willing to do anything to please him, blinded by obsessive infatuation. Hospital records from the night of the attack also noted Isabella's intense interest in seeing her mother post-autopsy, which was interpreted as a need to confirm Irene's death. Another damning testimony came from Paula, Carlos' ex-wife, who claimed that Isabella had once asked her if she knew anyone who could get rid of someone. Despite these incriminating pieces, it would take 2 more years for the case to see another breakthrough. In 2019, new testimony surfaced when Sean, a former acquaintance, disclosed that he had seen Carlos and Isabella together days after the crime. He also revealed that Carlos allegedly described how he had slit Irene's throat and promised Nicholas $10,000. Nicholas, meanwhile, said that, on the night of the crime, Carlos had left to return a car to his boss's home around 8 p.m., returning between 11 and 11:30 p.m. Later, Carlos reportedly confessed the crime to Nicholas after they went to a club around midnight. Due to his brain injury, however, Carlos might never face justice. On the morning of Tuesday, September 24, 2019, detectives arrested Isabella. A detective inspector present at the arrest informed the press that Isabella seemed stunned when officers arrived, and she was taken to the police station, where she awaited a murder charge. Police officials alleged that Isabella had planned her mother's murder and staged a break-in to cover up the crime, her primary motive being the financial gain from selling Irene's home. Following the arrest, Isabella was granted conditional bail but was held in custody pending her arraignment. Her defense argued that she had cooperated with authorities, provided DNA samples when requested, and handed over her passport in 2001 to comply with a travel hold. However, the prosecution denied bail, asserting that despite the circumstantial nature, the case was strong. The prosecution highlighted that the murder was financially motivated, with traces of Irene's blood found on Isabella's blouse from that night. Although the judge deemed the case reasonably strong, he felt it was not overwhelming, ruling that any flight risk from Isabella could be mitigated with strict bail conditions, including a $10,000 bond, twice daily check-ins at the police station, passport surrender, and no contact with witnesses. After remaining in police custody, Isabella's detention hearing proceeded in the New South Wales Supreme Court 3 days later. Nearly 3 years afterward, in May 2022, Isabella, formerly Megan Jones, age 48, was rearrested, and a New South Wales Supreme Court jury found her guilty of murdering Irene Jones on November 2, 2001. Upon hearing the verdict, Isabella expressed disbelief and claimed the jury had made a mistake. Finally, on November 16, 2022, Isabella was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a minimum of 14 years before eligibility for parole. In delivering the sentence, the judge recounted that Irene had been ambushed in her kitchen while drinking a glass of water and had died from the combined effects of strangulation and stab wounds to her neck. The judge remarked that in her final moments, Irene must have felt confused, terrified, and betrayed, emphasizing that her own daughter had orchestrated and likely carried out her murder, driven by obsessive infatuation and greed. Though the defense argued that Isabella's direct involvement in the fatal attack could not be definitively proven, the court acknowledged her role in a criminal conspiracy with Carlos, who, due to his condition, would likely evade justice. Isabella would be eligible for parole in 2036, at which point she would be 62 years old, with her full term expiring in 2042. As the sun set over the quiet parking lot, Heather wrapped up her day at work, looking forward to getting home to her daughter. She waved goodbye to her coworkers and walked toward her car, not noticing a figure hidden in the shadows. Suddenly, a person in a mask stepped forward, dressed all in black and holding a gun. Before Heather could react, the stranger aimed the weapon at her and said, "You've ruined my life." 2 gunshots shattered the silence, leaving her coworkers frozen with fear. The attacker quickly vanished into the night, but the shocking event was only the start. What followed was a chain of secrets and betrayals no one saw coming. During their time at the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio Garros and Heather Hodges met at a party. Ignacio was a friendly and confident young man, immediately catching Heather's attention. It was love at first sight for both of them. Heather had a lively personality with a hint of innocence, complemented by her fair skin, red lips, and dark hair. Ignacio found her irresistible and soon reached out to her. When he invited her on a date, Heather felt like Cinderella after the ball, radiant with joy. She eagerly shared the news with her roommates, who celebrated her happiness. For her friends, this new romance was special. They saw it as the beginning of something extraordinary, as Ignacio had never had a serious girlfriend before. Their relationship quickly deepened. Ignacio was thoughtful, often surprising Heather with flowers or her favorite coffee. His kindness and attentiveness made her feel cherished, and their bond grew stronger. After they graduated from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio proposed to Heather, who happily accepted. However, she set a clear condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated, she would end the marriage immediately with no second chances. This clause was a non-negotiable boundary for her. A year after their engagement, they married in a joyful ceremony. Ignacio began working as an officer for the Colorado Police Department, while Heather took a supervisory role at a local credit union. Her colleagues and clients deeply admired her for her exceptional ability to handle situations with empathy and grace. One coworker described her as a wonderful person, a sentiment that seemed universal. After their wedding, Heather and Ignacio decided to start a family. The birth of their daughter, Victoria, brought immense joy to their lives, and Heather's world began to revolve around her new baby. Ignacio also showed himself to be a dedicated father. From the outside, their life in 1997 looked perfect. But tragedy struck when Heather's father passed away from a heart attack, and shortly after, her mother, battling cancer, also passed away. Grieving, Heather dedicated herself to her mother's care, providing constant support until her mother's passing in 2003. Throughout this difficult time, Ignacio proved to be a caring husband, taking on additional responsibilities with their daughter and around the home. After months of supporting Heather, however, Ignacio's attention began to drift toward a coworker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the police department. Shauna, who was married to a Weld County deputy named Ken, had 2 children, though her marriage was on the rocks. Shauna later mentioned that her relationship with Ken changed after the birth of their second child. Initially, her interactions with Ignacio were friendly, but gradually, they became more flirtatious, and a deeper connection began to form between them. The relationship between Ignacio and Shauna eventually became the talk of the town, yet Heather remained unaware of the situation. Everyone around them knew but felt uncomfortable sharing the truth with her. Over time, the relationship between Ignacio and Shauna deepened, evolving beyond mere friendship. Their bond intensified, and though they were both married, they struggled to resist their mutual attraction. Eventually, Shauna discovered she was pregnant and excitedly shared the news with Ignacio. However, he reacted with hesitation, questioning whether the child could be his, as Ken had undergone a vasectomy after their second child's birth. This revelation led Ignacio to pressure Shauna into terminating the pregnancy, fearing the repercussions if Heather found out. Years passed, and Heather remained oblivious to her husband's affair with Shauna. But as Shauna grew frustrated, she decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna and a close friend followed Heather into a grocery store, watching her every move. Unaware of their presence, Heather was chatting with a friend on the phone. Eventually, Shauna approached her, hurling accusations and insults, which left Heather shocked and furious. This confrontation deeply unsettled Heather, prompting her to question Ignacio when she recognized Shauna as his coworker from the police department. Ignacio explained that Shauna had feelings for him, but assured Heather there was nothing to worry about. He promised to speak with Shauna and put an end to her harassment. However, even after this confrontation, Shauna continued to pursue Ignacio, adding strain to an already fragile situation. One evening, Shauna unexpectedly showed up at Ignacio and Heather's home, demanding to see Ignacio. This left Heather puzzled and uneasy. Although she didn't want to consider the idea of anything inappropriate between her husband and his coworker, she couldn't shake her curiosity about what was really going on. In a moment of confidence, Shauna confided in someone from the county dispatch center, sharing details about her relationship with Ignacio. She admitted that her feelings for him were stronger than anything she'd ever felt for anyone else. However, Shauna also expressed her frustration over Ignacio's wife, Heather, which complicated things further. According to her supervisor, Shauna's behavior was impacting her work. She even mentioned going to the shooting range to vent her frustrations, imagining the targets as Heather. Shauna's husband, Ken, had been unaware of her affair with Ignacio until he found her diary, which documented her secret relationship. Despite feeling betrayed, Ken decided to stay with Shauna for the sake of their children. Shauna knew Ignacio's affair was risky, giving her a sense of control as she was determined to remain in his life as his only woman. She even threatened to expose everything to Heather if Ignacio ever tried to end things. Her fixation on him intensified, and in July 2005, she took a bold step to solidify her attachment by tattooing his last name on her leg. Her infatuation spiraled further, reaching the point of harassment, especially when she learned that Ignacio and Heather were taking their daughter, Victoria, out to a restaurant. Shauna ensured she and her family were there as well. Though Shauna's behavior worried him, Ignacio continued the affair. When Shauna found herself pregnant again, she insisted on keeping the baby, naming him Christian. In March 2006, she gave birth while still married to Ken. Heather had no idea about this child, a result of Ignacio's involvement with Shauna. Ken, despite his knowledge, offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed with him, and she agreed. In the summer of 2006, while Heather was away, a woman approached her with shocking news. Shauna had recently given birth to Ignacio's child. Stunned and disoriented, Heather confronted Ignacio upon returning home. When pressed, he lied again, trying to keep his affair hidden. Trusting her husband, Heather believed him. But one December night in 2006, Heather awoke to find Ignacio missing. When he finally returned, she immediately confronted him. This time, Ignacio didn't attempt to lie. Instead, he confessed everything: his years-long affair with Shauna, both pregnancies and the birth of their son. True to her promise, Heather ended the relationship and asked Ignacio to leave. However, determined to keep her family intact for Victoria's sake, she reached out to Ignacio the next day, despite her initial disbelief. In their conversation, a heartbroken Heather made her feelings clear. She wanted to keep her marriage but wasn't ready to reconcile immediately. She laid out specific conditions for their future together. First, Ignacio had to take an STD test and agree to counseling to address the issues leading to his infidelity. Heather also insisted that Ignacio renounce his parental rights over Shauna's child and completely end his relationship with Shauna. Committed to saving his marriage, Ignacio agreed to every condition. Knowing he had deeply hurt Heather, he called Shauna to end the affair once and for all. While Ignacio was on the phone with Shauna, Heather listened in from nearby, hearing every word. Moments later, a message arrived on Heather's phone with a photo of Ignacio's son with the caption, "Flesh and blood." Shauna's fury escalated as she realized Ignacio had chosen to stay with Heather. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, Shauna considered pursuing child support, seeking financial compensation for her son, Christian. In early 2007, Ignacio and Heather were focused on rebuilding their marriage after Ignacio's infidelities. Despite the obstacles, they were determined to work through the challenges and move forward. However, as Ignacio tried to cut ties with Shauna, her harassment of Heather intensified, prompting Ignacio and Heather to take extreme steps to protect their family and home. They began parking Heather's car in the garage, fearing Shauna might damage it if it were left outside. They also sought legal assistance, having a lawyer send Shauna a formal warning that demanded she stay away from Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter, Victoria. The letter clearly instructed Shauna to cease all forms of harassment and intimidation. Despite these warnings, Shauna ignored the consequences and continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails filled with offensive and hurtful words. On January 23, 2007, around 6 p.m., Heather was leaving work at the credit union, eager to spend the evening with her daughter, but her peaceful night was shattered as she left the building with her coworkers and headed toward the parking lot. In the dimly lit area, a masked figure dressed in black and wielding a gun suddenly appeared, focusing on Heather. While others tried to hide, the assailant pointed the gun at Heather's head, ordered her to kneel, and said, "You've ruined my life," before shooting her twice in the head. After the attack, the shooter ran to a nearby red truck and quickly fled the scene. The shocking incident left Heather's colleagues in horror. Witnesses in the parking lot dialed 911 moments after the shooting. Paramedics arrived quickly, but their efforts to save Heather were in vain. The gunshot wounds to her head were fatal, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. When officers arrived to secure the crime scene, they realized the victim was Ignacio's wife. They immediately contacted Ignacio, urging him to come to the hospital. Racing through the hospital halls to reach the trauma room, Ignacio was stopped by a doctor who broke the devastating news that it was too late. Heather had passed away. Ignacio was hit hard by the realization that he would now have to break the heartbreaking news to his 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. At the crime scene, witnesses provided their accounts to the police. One described seeing the shooter appear suddenly and then quickly flee in a red truck. Another witness suggested the shooter might have been a woman, based on their movements. As the investigation continued, Shauna's name surfaced due to her history of harassing Heather. Knowing that Shauna drove a vehicle similar to the one witnesses had described, the police quickly compiled evidence linking her to the murder. A general radio alert was issued to locate Shauna in the red truck. Meanwhile, Shauna's husband, Ken, was on duty that night when he heard the alert regarding his wife and her vehicle. Following instructions, Ken soon located Shauna near their home. She claimed she had been running errands but aroused suspicion when Ken noticed she was barefoot despite the cold January weather in Colorado, wearing only socks, underwear, and pants. He called the police for assistance and Shauna was promptly taken into custody. During the investigation, authorities uncovered evidence connecting Shauna to Heather's murder. A pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA was found near the crime scene, and 2 bullet casings from a gun, the same type Ken used at work, were recovered from the scene. A Halloween mask was also found beneath the seat of Ken's red truck, similar to the one reportedly used in the crime. Investigators found a suspiciously empty bathtub at Shauna's home, raising questions about her intentions and whether she had planned to dispose of potential evidence after the murder. Shauna was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Though the shell casings matched the weapon type, the actual gun was never recovered. Ken had turned over his service weapon to his supervisor after Heather's murder, but the gun used in the shooting remained missing. Ken was also accused of evidence tampering and complicity. During his questioning, Shauna claimed she was merely running errands and had returned home to retrieve her forgotten wallet. She vehemently denied any involvement in Heather's murder, insisting she had no knowledge of the incident. Ignacio was questioned extensively following Heather's death, but was ultimately cleared of any suspicion by February 2008. Shauna's murder trial began, and she pleaded not guilty. The prosecution highlighted Shauna's fixation on Ignacio as a potential motive behind Heather's murder. As part of the state's case, they arranged a deal with Shauna's former best friend, who agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. She spoke of Shauna's deep-seated resentment toward Heather. Throughout the trial, Shauna defended herself fiercely, denying any fantasies about killing Heather and refuting all accusations. She argued that she was headed to a liquor store when the shooting occurred, and even claimed her best friend was obsessed with her and wanted to make her happy by removing Heather. However, her best friend denied these claims when called to the stand. The prosecution suggested that Shauna had worn her husband's clothes during the shooting to implicate him in the murder, asserting that by eliminating Heather, Shauna and Ignacio would be free to live happily ever after. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. Shauna was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Ken resigned from the police department after Shauna's conviction and filed for divorce. Following the guilty verdict, he relocated with his children, including Christian, the son Shauna had with Ignacio. After some time, Ken returned to court hoping his children would someday visit Shauna in prison, as he believed she was still a loving mother. All charges against Ken were eventually dropped. Tragically, in 2015, Victoria, only 17 years old, lost her life in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and struck a tree, marking another heartbreaking loss for the family. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope the stories gave you something to think about or dream about. Sleep well, stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.